Check folks and see if we
27 commissioners present and 2 commissioners absent.
I want to add that I just passed my cell phone to Mr. Saunders. Commissioner Swan was on my cell phone.
Okay.
I'm not sure his issue, so he may be joining us. Mr. Saunders just left the room with my cell phone, so I'm assuming he's trying to log in.
Okay, wonderful. So we have 28 commissioners present and 1 commissioner absent.
We have, will you say that number again?
Yes, ma'am. 28 commissioners present and 1 commissioner absent.
Thank you very much. So again, I want to reconfirm for those that I'm not sure sort of the technical situation with everybody hearing, but we have 28 commission members present and we have 1 commission member absent. So we will move forward with the commission members present so we can proceed with our business. You will recall that we recessed our meeting on February the 18th, 2021 with one important item of business remaining. That item is the final hearing of the Capitol Commission's petition for waiver. If granted, the requested waiver would allow the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest, David Glasgow Farragut, and Albert Gleaves to be moved from the Capitol building to the Tennessee State Museum. In a few minutes, I will turn the meeting over to Judge Summers, which I might add, we're trying to exactly locate her presence in the building at the moment, so we may have to pause again. But Judge Summers will preside over the hearing. First, I would like to note that Tennessee Code Annotated 4-1-412C6 provides in part that an interested entity, group, or individual shall be afforded an opportunity to offer public comments regarding a petition for waiver at any commission hearing on a petition. To comply with this provision, the commission will be allowing those who signed up to make comments to do so after the Capitol Commission rests its case and prior to Judge Summers charging the commission. I am now going to ask Ms. Jacqueline Matupi with the Office of External Affairs to explain the process that we're going to follow to receive those oral comments. Ms. Matupi, can you explain that process to the commenters, please, and the public? Let's pause another moment.
maybe on mute.
I don't see. We'll wait a moment. Once we iron out some of these technicalities, hopefully we're going to be smooth sailing.
Yeah, I think the ALJ is logged in.
Okay. Now I'm waiting for Ms. Matupi to. Okay, perfect. We're trying our very best to make this run as smoothly as possible. I don't think any of us anticipate all the moving parts, and hopefully those of you that were kind of paused here will appreciate we're trying our best to make this run as smoothly as we can with lots of different locations of people. Ms. Matupi, are you able to join us at this point?
I am. Thank you so much. And sorry for my absence. I was helping someone get out.
I want to just say thank you for all that you have done to make this possible. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Terrific. Thank you. Good morning. And thank you, Madam Chair. As noted, I'm Jacqueline Matupi with the Office of External Affairs, and will be moderating today's comment period, serving as a neutral party. As provided in a public notice for this hearing, only persons that requested to comment before the deadline of 5 p.m. Central Standard Time on March 3rd, 2021 will be able to do so today. For your convenience, when the comment period of the hearing begins, on your screen you'll see a list of those that had requested to comment and the order that they'll be speaking. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and we are enforcing a zero tolerance policy for disruptive behavior. If you interrupt another person commenting or another speaker during the meeting, you will be removed for the duration of this meeting. I will go over the process again when the comment period begins. As stated earlier, that will be after the Capitol Commission closes its case and before Judge Summers charges the commission. Madam Chair, back to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all that you've done to make these meetings possible in our new virtual world.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Commissioner Norman, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Ms. Muthupi. I would like to ask a question that, number one, when you put the name on the screen, the names of the people on the screen, they will be itemized. I want to clarify that they do have 3 minutes each.
Yes, sir.
And secondly, if a commissioner interrupts anyone, is that person removed as well?
I will defer to Madam Chair on that.
The last resort, if you can.
Madam Chair, do you want to answer that?
I can. Only as a last resort would we remove a commissioner, but I would ask for commission members to please let the public have their opportunity. We're glad they're with us and we are welcoming their comments. And so I would just ask that the commissioners will have plenty of opportunities to share their opinions at a later time. So does that answer your question, Commissioner Norman?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Judge Summers is present.
At this time, I would like to turn the meeting over to Judge Summers to preside over the hearing. Judge Summers, are you with us?
I am here by video.
Okay, I'm looking, oh, there you are. Thank you. So at this time, I will turn the meeting over to Judge Summers to preside over the hearing.
Good morning, everyone. We have convened here via WebEx on March 9th, 2021 for a hearing before the Tennessee Historical Commission to consider a petition filed, sorry, a few technical glitches here, to consider the petition filed by the State Capitol Commission to relocate the bus of Nathan Bedford Forrest, David Glasgow Farragut, and Albert Gleaves. That is docket number 04.48-204639A. As the administrative judge presiding over this matter, I will not participate in the decision on the merits of the petition. The members of the commission that are present will make that decision. I will, however, make all the rulings on evidence, law, and procedure under the authority granted to me by the Tennessee Administrative Procedures Act. We've had the commission members identify themselves. Can we have counsel for the petitioner identify herself for the record, please?
Good morning, Your Honor. This is Christie Allen, counsel for the State Capitol Commission.
And just so the record reflects, there is no respondent per se in this matter. There will be witnesses and evidence presented by the petitioner without any specific opposition by a respondent. Members of the commission are reminded that during the time this hearing is being conducted, no discussion concerning this case should take place between commission members or with witnesses, attorneys, or other persons unless all parties are present. This charge is certainly not as relevant as if we were all in a room together, but should anyone be inclined to have side conversations regarding this matter prior to the decision being made and the hearing being adjourned, please refrain from doing so. During the hearing, the commission sits as a jury and must only consider evidence introduced at the hearing in reaching its decision. The Sunshine Law requires all commission discussions and deliberations to be in public before all parties. Failure to observe the Sunshine Law may result in the commission's action being reversed or remanded if appealed to Chancery Court. Do we have any preliminary documents to provide to the commission members?
All been provided.
Okay.
Your Honor, this is Christy Allen. It's my understanding all the documents have been provided
Okay,
to the members.
except for hearing exhibit.
I believe we did provide, there is one exhibit in this hearing which consists of the petition and its supporting documentation. Mr. Sanders asked that we provide that prior to the hearing so that it could be distributed but not yet considered by the commission members, and I believe it has been distributed.
It has been.
Okay. We asked that for that commission members not consider any of the exhibits that have been provided to you by beforehand until they have actually been admitted into evidence for your consideration. Are there any preliminary matters that need to be addressed before we proceed with opening statements?
None that I'm aware of.
Ms. Allen, are you aware of anything?
None that I'm aware of, Your Honor.
Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Judge Summers and members of the Tennessee Historical Commission. My name is Christy Allen, and I am the General Counsel for the Department of General Services. I also serve as legal counsel to the State Capitol Commission. In October 2020, the State Capitol Commission filed a petition for waiver seeking to relocate the busts of Nathan Bedford Forrest, David Glasgow Farragut, and Albert Gleaves from their current locations in alcoves on the second floor of the State Capitol to the Tennessee State Museum to be made part of an exhibit to be established honoring Tennessee's military heroes. The exhibits in this case and the testimony you will hear will establish by clear and convincing evidence that there is a material or substantial need for waiver based upon the compelling public interest, that the historical significance and context of these figures will be better conveyed and appreciated in the museum setting. You will hear testimony concerning the deliberative process the State Capitol Commission undertook in considering whether to file this petition, including the public hearings it held and the numerous communications it received from concerned citizens. The result of the entirety of that process is the petition you have before you today. You will hear testimony concerning the installation of the three busts and the figures they memorialize. You will hear testimony from the museum explaining its purpose to oversee the state's artifact collection and its process or plan to receive and exhibit the three busts. And finally, I would like for you to hear from Governor Lee, who has shared with us a video statement. Would you please roll that?
Thank you, fellow members of the Historical Commission, for taking up the issue of the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust. I'll share the same sentiments that I shared in advance of the Capitol Commission meeting last July that resulted in a majority vote to move the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust and 2 other busts to the State Museum. The Nathan Bedford Forrest bust has spurred a heated debate that began long before all the national turmoil on monuments that we've seen in the last year. Since taking office in 2019, thousands of Tennesseans have reached out to me to express passionate views, and I know many have reached out to governors before me. The issue of the Forrest bust that's been going on for the last 40 years is very different from the destructive tide that swept the nation last year that resulted in defacing property and denying history. We're instead addressing questions of history and symbolism and context in a responsible manner, and I appreciate your willingness to engage. This body is one part of a process designed by the Tennessee General Assembly with representative citizen appointees who use a framework to determine the historical figures whom we revere in the halls of our State House. I have great respect for this process and the task the members face on the complex question of Nathan Bedford Forrest. A Confederate general from Memphis, Nathan Bedford Forrest is a renowned military tactician, and the bust sits opposite a fellow Tennessean, Union Admiral, and esteemed military leader, David Glasgow Farragut. In tandem, these 2 men represent the push and pull of our state's history and the conflict that forged so much of our identity and our role in striving for a more perfect union. Nathan Bedford Forrest is as much a part of our past as David Farragut, the first leader of the United States Navy. However, Forrest represents pain, suffering, and brutal crimes committed against African Americans, and that pain is very real for many of our fellow Tennesseans as they walk the halls of our State House and evaluate how he could be one of the just 9 busts elevated to a place of honor and reverence. Symbols matter. Proclamations and statues are not just snapshots of our history. They're a window into what we value. But while the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust creates a clear tension between heritage and symbolism, we'd be wise to not make this a referendum on his place in history. The Nathan Bedford Forrest bust is not just another Confederate symbol. There's a reason that this particular bust has, for 40 years, stood above others as controversial. It's because this individual, during a season of his life, significantly contributed to one of the most regretful and painful chapters in our nation's history. As I did with the Capitol Commission, I'm asking the Historical Commission to consider whether the current placement of the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust allows for his full story to be told and his contribution to our history to be understood. As guardians of history, we can't underestimate that history without understanding is quickly forgotten. Many have argued that despite Nathan Bedford Forrest's disturbing track record, he died a reconciled man who recognized the evil he perpetrated and turned from his ways. At a minimum, there should be context around Forrest to acknowledge the complexity of his legacy in Tennessee. I believe his contribution to what life in the 19th century looked like in Tennessee is important, and it deserves to be displayed, written about, and discussed in the most appropriate location, which is the Tennessee State Museum. While the Capitol Commission's earlier vote acknowledged the vast public interest in the Forrest bust, I'm proposing that you advance the Capitol Commission's proposal to move the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust and 2 other military busts to the State Museum. I've continuously said that we should learn from our history rather than whitewash it. I've also said the most appropriate resolution for the Forrest bust is to put it in the appropriate context. I am as committed to those beliefs today as I ever have been. What I would add now is that the most appropriate way to give full context to this complicated life is to put the bust in the State Museum, where the very purpose is to see and understand our history in full. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration of the Capitol Commission's resolution to this issue and how advancing this solution will lead to an exhibit that can be studied and learned from and seen in full context.
Governor Lee has made his opinion clear on the proposed relocation of the busts. I believe the governor's remarks, the reasoning of the State Capitol Commission, and the evidence you will hear today will provide you the basis to grant the State Capitol Commission's petition. Thank you. And
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Would you like to proceed with your evidence?
yes, Your Honor. As a preliminary matter, I'd like to ask the Capitol Commission to take judicial notice of two policies that have been adopted by the State Capitol Commission. These have been published on the State Capitol Commission's website, and Mr. Sanders has a copy and has been provided copies of these policies as well. The first is a policy regarding future monuments and memorials that was adopted by the State Capitol Commission on December 15th, 2014. The second is a policy regarding criteria for commemorative works that was adopted by the State Capitol Commission on November 10th, 2015. And again, the Capitol Commission requests that the Historical Commission take judicial notice of these documents as governing documents for future monuments and memorials. So I'd like to call my first witness. The Capitol Commission calls Commissioner Butch Ely. Someone needs to swear him in. Will someone swear him in as a witness?
Judge Summers, would you?
Well,
swear in?
I am. I'm trying to see where he is.
He's waving at you.
I'm right here.
I'm just wondering if I'm not seeing everybody.
I'm in the room with Chair.
Oh,
right
so
here.
you're very, very tall. I see you. Okay. If you would, if you would raise your right hand for me, please.
Okay.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Very
Yes.
good.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name and position for the record.
Yes, Howard Butch Ely, and I am Commissioner of the Department of Finance and Administration.
And Commissioner Ely, how long have you served in that role?
Approximately 11 months. I was sworn in April 16th of last year, 2020.
And in your capacity as Commissioner of Finance and Administration, you are also an ex officio member of the State Capitol Commission. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you are chair of the State Capitol Commission. Is that correct?
Yes, I am, and I was appointed by Governor Lee on July the 1st of 2020 to serve as chair of that commission.
We are here today on the State Capitol Commission's petition for waiver. Is that correct?
Correct.
The Capitol Commission would seek to introduce into the record Exhibit 1, which is the Capitol Commission's petition for waiver and supporting documentation in its entirety. We have provided an authenticating affidavit of Ann McGauran, who is the administrator for the State Capitol Commission, to certify that this document is what was filed with the State Capitol Commission, and I believe copies have been provided to them.
Ms. Allen, how are you providing those documents to the tribunal?
They have been provided via email, is my understanding, and I have hard copies here.
Okay, can I be more specific? How are you providing those documents to me?
I can email it to you right now, if that is okay.
That will be fine. And if you would continue to do so with all of your exhibits, we're not really accepting hard paper exhibits.
Okay. An attorney in my office, Beth Henderson, is here with me today as well, and you may see the email coming from her.
Okay.
And if you would also send the two policies. Yeah. One moment, Your Honor. It's Kim Summers. Okay. Let me know.
The email address is going to be d.kim.summers.
Thank you. Got it. All right, thank you. We'll continue. Commissioner Ely, would you explain what led up to the State Capitol Commission's vote to petition for the waiver?
Yes, thank you. As this body knows, the Capitol Commission voted 9-2 in this past July to relocate the statues of Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest, along with United States Navy's Admiral David Farragut and Albert Gleaves to the State Museum. And that commission meeting began with the motion to relocate Confederate Forrest bust, and was subsequently amended to also include the bust of Admiral Farragut and also Admiral Gleaves.
So I'd like to take you back a little bit to discuss specifically the consideration of the Forrest bust. If you would please explain to the Historical Commission what has occurred during 2020 on the consideration of the Forrest bust by the Capitol Commission.
Yes, this was prior to my becoming chair, but my understanding, and then reviewing the minutes, Capitol Commission Chairman Stuart McWhorter held a meeting to discuss the topic in February, I think February the 20th of 20, to discuss this item.
Did you, Commissioner Ely, and other members of the Historical Commission, to your knowledge, receive communications from the public advocating for or against the relocation of Forrest bust?
I can't answer specifically for all of the members, but I know, at least for myself, and I think all the members did as well, but we kind of kept a running tally of communication leading up to that July the 9th meeting. And so prior to that and leading up, I had received communications to the level of 686 communications that were for removal of the bust, and 28 against removal of the bust.
Did you hear from any of there's been discussion about the resolution that initiated the installation of the bust in the Capitol, and that having been authored by the late Senator Douglas Henry. Did you hear from any of Senator Henry's connected family?
Yes, we did. This one of those communications included a letter from the family of the late Senator Douglas Henry, who was the Senate sponsor of the bust of Confederate Forrest, and that communication also was asking for its removal from the Capitol.
Then let's move forward to the public meeting that the Capitol Commission conducted on July 9th of 2020. Can you describe in some fashion the public comment that the Capitol Commission received and any other comments that the Commission considered that day?
Yes, we heard from a number of people on that day. Public communication was afforded where people could comment. Also, Governor Lee.
Go ahead.
Governor Lee spoke in person at that meeting, at the July 9th meeting, in favor of relocating the bust. And we had several comments made by legislators who attended the meeting as well, and also the public who had commented during that time frame.
Thank you. The draft minutes from the July 9th, 2020 meeting are part of the Historical Commission members' packet and have been made an exhibit to this hearing. But would you summarize for the Historical Commission the rationale or the reasons behind the Capitol Commission's action in filing this petition for waiver?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to ensure and kind of state for the record that the Capitol Commission heard each and every opinion before we took the vote, both written and spoken. We made accommodation for both in-person witness as well as or in-person comment, as well as virtual testimony because of the pandemic. That session really was a discussion in the commission that focused on the tension that the bust of Confederate General Forrest created between history and the negative symbolism that he represents to many people. And the vote on the Capitol Commission really sought to move the bust from the Tennessee State Capitol to the Tennessee State Museum, as we know, where a full and complex history can be displayed.
Thank you, Commissioner. And again, the draft minutes from the entirety of that meeting are part of Exhibit 1, which you've been provided, and also articulate, and if you could help a little, Commissioner, on this, articulate too the reasons for the proposed relocation of Farragut and Gleaves. I believe there was discussion about a potential military holocaust.
That's right. So it began with the discussion in a motion actually for the removal of the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust. Subsequently, one of the members made an amendment and added also the bust of the other items.
Thank you. And again, that the detail of that conversation is included in that draft.
That's correct.
minutes.
Yes, it's all.
Thank you. So thank you for explaining the Capitol Commission's deliberations and vote. Do you have anything else you'd like to add for the Historical Commission's consideration today?
Yes, I would. First, I also want to thank Chair Williams and all the members of this commission for their thoughtful consideration of this matter. I personally supported and continue to support this relocation where these items can be displayed and have the proper context to be provided. That said, we are all acutely aware of the gravity of today's discussion, particularly that our conversation involves far more than mere statues. While I respect the opinion of those that feel that we should maintain the bust of the Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest in the Capitol, it's clear to me that the bust is a stark reminder of painful ideology and way of life that has caused tremendous anguish and distress on the part of African Americans. Forrest bust has created tension between history and symbolism. As the governor said, symbols matter, and they're a window into what we value. For many, General Forrest represents a particular painful part of our history. One thing I know for sure is that there's simply no way that I can really know how my African American peers truly feel. I've not walked a mile in their shoes, but I've never had a personal perspective into what their lives and the lives of their ancestors were really like. But I do know, however, that if we can alleviate the pain and foster better relationships among all Tennesseans, then I welcome that opportunity. It was the will of the Capitol Commission by a vote of 9-2 to move these three statues together to the State Museum. And I'm here today to respectfully ask Madam Chair and all the members of the committee to concur with that action of the Capitol Commission. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ely. Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
Does any member of the commission have any questions for this witness?
Your Honor, so the commission members understand at this time, if they have questions for the witness, can we explain that to them? We have many new commission members that have never been through a final hearing. So I just want to let the commission members know that at this time, if they have any questions for the witness, they may ask them now. Is that correct, Your Honor?
That is correct. The questions should be limited to questions that may request elaboration or clarification of any of the witness testimony, not delving into any topics not previously covered in the testimony. So if anyone needs to explore any of this testimony for purposes of clarification or elaboration, you are certainly welcome to ask those questions if you feel like that information is necessary for purposes of rendering a decision.
Your Honor, this is Sam Elliott. I'm one of the vice chairman of the commission, and I just have a few clarifying questions with the court's indulgence.
You may proceed.
All right. Mr. Ely, thank you for being here today. Just as a matter of clarification, directing your attention to the petition for waiver about the 16th page.
Can we be more specific than that?
Make sure my pages are the same.
It may not be.
It's entitled before the Tennessee Historical Commission petition for waiver and supporting report.
Okay. Is the supporting report?
Okay, go ahead and direct your question.
Yes, sir. There is some factual background as to each of the statutes that are, or statues that are at issue on the first page. The background of the three statues coming into the Capitol. Is that accurate to the best of your knowledge?
I have read the petition for waiver and support, and yes, to the best of my knowledge, this information is correct.
Thank you, sir. Is it true that the Capitol is the center of the state government and not a military museum?
I can attest that it is the center of state government, and to my knowledge, it is not a military museum.
All right, sir. And is it fair to say that the removal of the Farragut and the Gleaves bust is meant to create a consistency within the Capitol as to military figures?
I believe that would be an accurate statement. I think that during the discussion of the Capitol Commission, there was recognition that all three of these were individuals being discussed were military leaders, and that it would be appropriate to have all three of these busts be moved to the State Museum where more context could be provided.
Is it fair to say, based on your knowledge, that the State Museum gets more visitation than the state capitol from the public?
I don't know the numbers of visitation. I would say that both get visitation, but I know that certainly the intention of the State Museum is to be able to allow those that go to the museum to be able to learn more about what they are seeing, and that it would be, I believe, a more appropriate venue for learning and contextual historical significance.
One thing you mentioned about the correspondence from Senator Henry's family, did they mention that Senator Henry was a well-known and passionate advocate of study of Tennessee history?
My recollection of that communication is that yes, they did. I also had the high honor of knowing Senator Henry personally, and I know him to be a true historian that is very familiar with Tennessee history.
And to the best of your knowledge, he was not a white supremacist?
No, to the best of my knowledge, he was not a white supremacist.
Your Honor, that's all the questions I have for him. Thank you, Mr. Ely.
Thank you, sir.
Any commissioner have questions for this witness? Okay, Ms. Allen, any follow-up questions?
No follow-up questions unless there's anything Commissioner Ely would like to add. And he's shaking his
No,
head
I'm
no.
good. No.
Nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
All right, thank you so much. Your next witness.
Thank you, Commissioner Ely. The Capitol Commission would like to call this next witness, Dr. Derrick Christie. Are you on the line with us, Dr. Christie?
Yes, Ms.
Where?
Allen.
Wonderful, thank you. If we would court swear, there you are.
Dr. Christie, if you would raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Frisbee. Thank you for being with us today. Would you please state your name, position, and education for the record?
My name is Derrick Christie, and I teach military and Tennessee history at Middle Tennessee State University as a lecturer in the history and global studies and human geography departments. I earned my PhD from the University of Alabama, as well as my MA in history and higher education administration from Alabama, and BA from Middle Tennessee State University.
Thank you, Dr. Frisbee. I appreciate you being here with us today. I believe you have been provided a copy of the State Capitol Commission's petition for waiver. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I believe I have a copy of the findings of fact, and I believe I have a copy of the petition for waiver based upon Mr. Elliott's questioning. I'm not sure I have the right document either, but I'll take any questions you have.
Okay, that's fine. What I would like for you to do for us, Dr. Frisbee, we two general areas that I'd like for you to talk about and explain to the Historical Commission. One, if you, to the best of your knowledge, could talk about the installation of the busts of Forrest, Farragut, and Gleaves in the Capitol, whatever relevant historical facts there may be, and why the museum would be an appropriate place for them to be displayed.
Okay, great. I'm interested to find out what Mr. Elliott was referring to with the history of the installation, because my research indicates that somewhere around World War II, the Historical Commission, probably around April of 1944, started talking about a harbor of heroes, or at least installation of memorials or busts of certain military figures, and many of them were related to naval actions or naval service. They were calling it a harbor of heroes. And so the first two busts that were supposed to go in this harbor of heroes were Admiral Farragut and Admiral Murray, Matthew Fontaine Murray, and they were intended to be opposite of each other in the state capitol building. Of course, Farragut served in the Union Navy, and Murray served in the Confederate Navy. And at some point, the Murray bust, I guess, just disappeared. Not sure why the niche was empty when Senator Henry recommended the Forrest bust, but for a long time, it's my understanding that the Murray bust and the Farragut bust stood opposite of each other. And then Senator Henry, finding the Murray statue, I guess, gone, decided to put or recommended that the Forrest bust be put there in its place. So that's the information that I've discovered. Now, the Gleaves bust was added sometime around that same period as well. was intended to be some paintings of the same level, of the same nature, but all of that was sort of done together somewhere around the mid 1940s.
I believe that Beth Henderson in my office has provided you again with the petition for waiver and supporting report.
Okay.
Did you send him the dates? Yeah. If you could turn to page 17, it's stamped at the top, which is the document entitled Petition for Waiver and Supporting Report that Mr. Elliott referred to. And
okay.
There are 2 paragraphs that govern or that discuss the 3 busts that are the subject of the petition. And if you would review those and share any thoughts you have on the accuracy of the information represented based on your research.
Yeah, I believe I'm looking at page 17 before the Tennessee Historical Commission Petition for Waiver and Supporting Report.
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, just looking over this. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, ultimately, the Harbor of Tennessee Heroes idea did not materialize as it was said. I'm not sure that the Gleaves statue was part of that. Like I said, specifically, the newspaper accounts from 1944 talk about the Murray statue and the Farragut statue being opposite of each other. And the article indicates that, according to the commission at the time, that this was in the architect's plans. This was in William Strickland's plan for the Capitol to have sort of this gallery of heroes. It doesn't necessarily indicate military heroes, but it does indicate sort of, prominent figures, I believe, in Tennessee history.
Thank you, Dr. Frisbee. And would you provide for the members of the commission a brief historical background of each of the individuals?
Oh, a brief historical background? I don't think historians can do anything briefly. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't really know the order in which you want me to proceed with this. Let's go with probably the 2 briefest ones first. I would say that Albert Gleaves was a noted naval, engineer, logistician. He did a lot with developing sort of the accuracy and improving torpedoes prior to World War I. And then during World War I, he became sort of noted for his leadership in the logistical convoy system, transporting Americans and supplies to Europe. And for that, he was well noted in the Navy and in history and in military history. So he was always sort of a real advocate for a lot of pushing for strong naval policy during his lifetime. And so that's sort of Albert Gleaves, I guess, in brief. As far as David Farragut goes, I think he is well known sort of for his Civil War service, although he did serve in the Navy prior to that in places like the Mexican War. He's probably best known in the Civil War for the capture of New Orleans, in which he reportedly, Mobile Bay, not New Orleans, but in Mobile, where he reportedly gave the order to dam the torpedoes in full speed ahead. And so Mobile Bay was taken as a result of Farragut's leadership and tenacity there during that period. And so those are sort of, he was the first admiral in the Navy. So, that just goes to show you the respect and level of esteem that his colleagues and the country had for him, that he was our first admiral in that period of time. Now, of course, not included in here is Matthew Murray, so we'll sort of skip that. But I think probably the one that most people would be interested in is Nathan Bedford Forrest. Probably most of the people on the commission are probably familiar with sort of the historiography of Forrest and his exploits during the war. Obviously, born in Chapel Hill, Tennessee, later moved to Mississippi, south of Memphis, in and around the Memphis area. Was a slave trader prior to the war, and later joined the Confederate Army and served, rising through the ranks to, I believe, Lieutenant General. And under his leadership as a cavalry commander, he was noted for his ferocity as well as his courage. And he was also sort of responsible for troops at the Battle of Fort Pillow, which is one of the more noted incidents, I'm sure, that relate to the controversy here. And in that engagement, there was a disproportionate number of African American troops that were serving with Tennessee Unionists at that position, and many of them were shot in the process of surrendering or after their surrender. And so that was investigated by a congressional committee, and it was labeled a massacre by the committee. Although I will say that Abraham Lincoln said it didn't matter if 3 people or 300 people were massacred at Fort Pillow. He wanted justice to be served. After that, of course, when the Confederacy fell, Forrest returned back to being a businessman in Memphis. Not a very good businessman in Memphis, I might add, according to the records. And later, along with several others, were part of the leadership of the Ku Klux Klan, a white supremacist organization, or at least a organization that sought to prevent Unionists and African Americans from voting against Democrats in the Reconstruction period.
Thank
So
you,
that's
Dr.
the brief.
Frisbee.
That's the brief version.
Thank you, Dr. Frisbee. We appreciate you.
Right.
Your Honor, I have nothing further for Dr. Frisbee at this time, and I'm happy to turn him over to the commission members if they have any questions.
Okay, does any member of the commission have any questions for this witness about his testimony?
Your Honor, this is Sam Elliott. I have a few questions for Dr. Frisbee again.
Uh-oh.
You may proceed.
First, thank you for being here again, Dr. Frisbee. It's nice to see you again, and
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Appreciate it.
glad they got a good historian in here to see what's going on. Just a few questions, and this is more to flesh out the record than anything else, because I thought your testimony was comprehensive. It's fair to say that at least Fort Pillow, it was both white and black prisoners who were shot. They were Unionists, were they not?
They were white Tennessee Unionists with African American soldiers sent from Memphis.
Yeah. Isn't it fair to say that in recent years there's been considerable literature in the historical ranks on the study of Civil War memory?
That would be very accurate. There's been, as you probably know, there's been a book a day written about the Civil War since it started. There's even been a book a week about Gettysburg, but I would say that Civil War memory is going to be a close second.
And about a book a month, about to be exaggerating a little bit in the same vein, about General Forrest. He's the subject of intense interest, is he not?
Particularly, yes.
Yes, I guess on both sides of the issue. As far as Confederate memorials, of course, that they're in the news every day nowadays, and it probably, while this particular one has been an issue for 40 years, more or less, the discussion has been maybe in the last 5 or 6 years since the incident at Charleston. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. And critics of Confederate memorials in public space question valorizing the losing side of the Civil War ignoring or glossing over the history of slavery, and propagating the lost cause mythology built up around the Confederacy. Is that fair to say?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. Critics of Confederate memorials in public space question valorizing the losing side of the Civil War, ignoring or glossing over the history of slavery, and propagating the lost cause mythology.
Yes, that is correct.
All right. And they also note that that Confederate symbols have sometimes been used by white supremacists to advocate racial theories, and that their presence on public property is hurtful to African Americans.
Correct.
All right. Now, it's also fair to say that many Tennesseans admire General Forrest for his brilliant military career, correct?
Yes.
And that advocates of Confederate memorials believe that they are symbols of Southern culture and deny their purpose is to demonstrate white supremacy.
I would believe that. Yes.
And that their purpose is to honor the bravery and sacrifice of Confederate soldiers and civilians.
Yes.
All right. And that removing Confederate statues and memorials is denying and or erasing history.
That is what they believe, yes.
Yeah. Now, I've heard the word contextualization or context a lot. I heard the governor mention it, and it's been mentioned from the Capitol Commission too. Is that one methodology that is being advocated for the addressing the issue of Confederate memorials?
That is one. That is one idea. Yes.
All right. And I believe that concept was first developed by the Atlanta History Center, if I'm not mistaken.
I couldn't speak to that, but I'll stipulate it.
All right. And the purpose of it is the purpose of contextualization is for educational purposes, correct?
That is true.
And that's why that's what we understand the Capitol Commission wants to do with these statues is to move them to the State Museum to provide proper context, correct?
It is my understanding that the State Museum would like to have these in another exhibit at the museum, or at least part of the new exhibit hall, and that they would provide context for each figure.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frisbee. It is good to see you again.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
This is Doug Couples. May I ask questions?
Please.
Yes, Dr. Frisbee, nice to see you.
Hey, Doug, how are you doing?
Fine. Just a couple of few short questions. Are you familiar with the work of Brian Wills, probably the most thorough Forrest biographer?
Yes. Brian Wills wrote one of the better biographies of Forrest, I would say. Would be my opinion.
And also Fort Pillow. And you're aware that he did not hold Forrest responsible for any excesses Fort Pillow?
I have to go back and look. I don't remember that specifically being part of the narrative where about responsibility or accountability for that.
Okay. One other question, really, or a couple. Regarding the congressional hearings during the Grant administration on Reconstruction, are you familiar with Forrest's testimony?
Yes.
And you're familiar that he denied any association with the Klan?
Yes, I'm aware that he denied that.
Okay. And are you aware that the congressional hearing did not find him responsible for any of the Klan activities?
I don't remember exactly what they said about Forrest necessarily. I believe they said that his testimony did not lead them to any conclusions. I have to sort of say that.
That's about it. Just one other question. And are you aware that or do you recall that the widow of General Gordon claimed that General Gordon was the Grand Wizard?
I am aware of that. I'm also aware that Elizabeth Merriweather believed that Minor Merriweather was also the Grand Wizard of the Klan. I believe they disputed.
That's really my real. Apparently, there's a fair amount of confusion as to the leadership, isn't there?
As with any terrorist organization, I would think that's confusing. Yes, it's difficult.
That's what I was wondering. It just doesn't seem to be any clear answer to me. Is the reason I was asking.
Sure. There's a lot of dispute about. I mean, you're talking about a group that was divided up into many cells, and while I'm sure, and I believe that in the testimony that Forrest gave, that he did sympathize with some of the Klan's objectives in terms of trying to sort of redeem the state, he did deny he was a member of the organization or whatever. But I'm sure that most of the other cells in that group would have relished the fact that they could use his name as a sort of a public relations recruiting tool, whether he was or wasn't. His name was definitely used.
That's all I'm trying to get to is what do we know and what we don't know, what some people think in advance. I'm just saying that it doesn't seem to be there's any real concrete information on who. And I agree with you, a bunch of cells is probably the more likely possibility. Let me ask you.
Judge Summers?
Any additional questions from any member of the commission?
Yes, Judge Summers, this is Ann Toplovich, a member of the Tennessee Historical Commission. Can you hear me?
I can.
All right. This is for Dr. Frisbee. A couple of.
May I ask? I was not through, Ann, if that's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. You cut out on us. I'm sorry.
Yes, it is cutting in and out. I agree. I don't know what happened. I just wanted to ask if you're aware of his address to the pallbearers where he advised them to exercise their rights as citizens to vote.
Yes, General Forrest appeared in front of a group of African Americans and did suggest that they exercise their right to vote.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you very much. No, Ann, I'm through.
Thank you.
I apologize, Mr. Couples. We thought you were finished, Ms. Koplovich.
Right. I have two questions for clarification for Dr. Frisbee. First, Dr. Frisbee, what month and year did the conflict at Fort Pillow take place?
It was April 1864.
Thank you. And when did the Congressional Committee convene to investigate?
Probably within a week or 2 weeks of the actual incident. It became fairly well publicized, and given the nature of the upcoming election, many radical Republicans were eager to sort of demonstrate the savagery, brutality of Southerners to prevent a more lenient Reconstruction that Abraham Lincoln was proposing.
Thank you. I think the New York Times carried a story on the conclusions in May of 1864, so it was on the heels. And my final question was, reference was made to the...
Your entry not valid.
Excuse me.
Not started yet. Re-enter access code or meeting number followed by pound.
Reference was made to Unionists being killed at Fort Pillow by Unionists.
Enter your attendee ID number followed by pound. If you know your attendee
I got muted, but Dr. Frisbee, by referring to Unionists being killed at Fort Pillow, that's actually reference to members of the U.S. Army who were killed at Fort Pillow, correct?
Yes.
USCT troops, for example, were part of the United States Army.
Yes, the United States colored troops were composed of freedmen who, most of whom had gone to Memphis after being liberated by Union troops, and later.
So it was members of the U.S. Army who were present at Fort Pillow, in addition, perhaps, to Unionist sympathizers.
Yes, there was a group, there was a regiment, or at least a battalion of white Tennessee Unionists there prior to the United States colored troops' arrival. And those two groups did not get along very well, and so it led to sort of a lot of leadership issues and confusion.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that they were members of the U.S. Army. So thank you.
Yeah,
and that concludes my questions.
I had one point of clarity, Madam Chair, that I wanted to clarify.
You may proceed.
That my colleague, Dr. Couples, mentioned a historian. I just wanted to clarify his name again. I had not heard his name again.
It's Brian Wills.
And Brian Wills' position was just that of a historian, correct?
He is a professor. I forget. I don't know where he's at now, or if he's retired.
Okay.
But
okay, that answers it because
historian, yes, sir.
Okay, it clarifies it because I think Dr. Couples said he did not hold him accountable. I just wanted to make sure that this was not a person that was in the legal community or law enforcement anyway.
I believe he's down at Kennesaw State, Derrick.
Okay.
Okay, it was in Virginia at one point, yeah.
That helps me. Thank you.
Your Honor, this is Commissioner Dollar. I have a question for Dr. Christie.
Okay.
Can you all hear me?
Just as a reminder that I am presiding over this portion of the proceeding, and if commission members have questions, if you would so notify, and you will certainly be given liberty to ask them.
This is Commissioner Dollar. Your Honor, can you hear me?
Yes, you may proceed.
Dr. Frisbee, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Commissioner Elliott made a reference to the influence of the lost cause methodology on the memory of Forrest, and you acknowledged that was indeed a factor. There are probably a few of us who are aware of that, but it might be instructive for you to briefly mention what the lost cause methodology was and what that entailed.
I didn't know it was going to be a test, but okay.
Well, I know you're probably used to being put on the spot in the classroom, so I didn't feel too bad about it.
Yeah, the lost cause methodology sort of seeks to remove, again, very briefly, seeks to remove slavery as sort of, I guess, a stain on the Southern cause in which they fought. We often get questions from students about what was the Civil War really fought about? Was it really states' rights? And I often tell people it was about the states' rights for slavery. Had it been, a states' rights on almost anything else, I'm not sure that we would have had the war. But for many Southerners looking for some sort of excuse for the defeat, they sort of focused on more of the military aspects, the bravery, the courage of the Southern soldier. And sort of, it sort of shifted the blame. It wasn't the Southerners' cause that was the factor in their defeat. It was sort of, there's a number of different arguments whether the North just sort of overwhelmed the South with resources, or whether the South lost its will to fight, or these kinds of arguments. But basically, the lost cause argument seeks to find some other means for explaining the Confederate drive for independence other than slavery.
Wouldn't you agree that in the years and decades after the Civil War ended, it essentially was a Southern perspective? We would probably phrase it today, a Southern spin on the war that meant to de-emphasize slavery, and to honor and memorialize the Confederate dead as dying for a just cause. And of course, it's in that context that many of these monuments throughout the nation have been erected. But I thought that was important for the commission members to know, that, of course, de-emphasizing slavery, memorializing Confederate leaders was part of that, and that was part of the story of Forrest memorialization.
Yeah, and I would add that the lost cause starts almost immediately after the war is over. Many of Lee's staff members are sort of part of that. But I would also say that in the context of Confederate memory and national memorialization, a lot of that lost cause ideology coincides with sort of the latter stages of the veterans of the war. And so many of these veterans are wanting to put up monuments. They've got this money. They want to do something with it, so they're putting up monuments. The lost cause ideology sort of gets tied up with that. So you look at the timeline of when the National Battlefield Parks were created and the veterans reunions and the latter stages of their lives, that all sort of coincides with each other. It's just part of that memory. No one wants to sort of see themselves as fighting for a cause that was inglorious, like slavery. So many of these veterans sort of attach themselves to this idea that they were fighting for a better cause than just slavery. And Forrest plays into that in particularly. And if you don't, I'll try to briefly say this. Forrest fits into that lost cause mythology because he's not an educated Southerner. Of all the generals, I think there maybe were 12 that weren't West Point graduates or didn't have any sort of military training. And I think only Forrest is the one that didn't have any real formal education. And so many Southerners that were not even slaveholders sort of attached themselves to Forrest because they see him as sort of an ideal of social mobility. Here is someone who started with nothing and rose to fame and earned honor and courage, at least courage, not maybe honor, but courage on the battlefield, ingenuity, initiative. And those were qualities I think that many Southerners wanted to sort of emulate, and they sort of attached themselves to the memory of Forrest as a result of that. So, Forrest was seen more of as and it's kind of, I guess, ironic given, Forrest's wealth, but they sort of attached themselves to seeing Forrest as sort of an average Southerner, like many of them would. That explains part of his popularity.
Just one more question, Your Honor, for the witness. And I really am going to put you on the spot here, Dr. Frisbee. If I remember correctly, yes, there were white Tennesseans and African Americans there at Fort Pillow, both serving in Union units. If I recall correctly, and you correct me if I'm wrong, this is really a question for you, but as I recall, the ratio of killed black to white was somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 or maybe over 70% of African American soldiers were killed, and maybe it was down for white soldiers down to in the 20%, something like that. Do you recall that? I recall that from my notes.
That is correct, but the tactical situation of the battlefield could be partly responsible for that. The white Tennessee Unionists that were there did not want the United States colored troops at their position. They segregated themselves. The white Tennessee Unionists demanded that the African American troops be housed outside the fort walls. This put them at a disadvantage, and it blocked a lot of the fields of fire for the fort. And then due to leadership issues within the fort itself, when the fort was finally surrounded, the white Tennessee soldiers went down behind the bluff while the African-American soldiers stayed on the fort walls. The plan was to have a fighting retreat. The African-Americans would sort of absorb the first initial blow of the Confederate attack and then, on command, retreat down the bluff to where the white Unionist soldiers were in order to launch a counterattack once the Confederate troops sort of broke ranks and charged. Unfortunately, the United States colored troop commanders gave conflicting commands, and so part of the garrison started to surrender. The other part started to fight, and the white Tennessee soldiers that were down the bluff were sort of left, waiting for these things to happen. So it was a very confusing tactical situation. It was a collapse of leadership on the part of the garrison itself, but the African-American soldiers, the United States colored troops, they're the ones that absorbed the biggest blow. And so as a result of that, yes, they suffered the most casualties. And in testimony before the Congressional Committee, many of those wounded stated that they saw people surrendering and being shot.
Thank you, Dr. Frisbee. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any additional questions from other commission members?
Yes, this is Joanne Moore. In the congressional investigation of the Fort Pillow affair, is it not true that General Sherman was there, and that after hearing the evidence, he did not find General Forrest culpable of what was called a massacre? He said that it was simply the results of warfare. And so to think that General Sherman, who's the scourge of the South, would say that about General Forrest in this particular case, and then, as a matter of fact, he made the comment that he thought General Forrest was the greatest general of the war, as did General Lee. And then to address your comment about the lost cause mythology, I think that the words lost cause have come to be put down, if you will, of what the Southern people fought after the war. And so in answer to that, I'm going to quote to you the words of a common, everyday Southerner. He was a Methodist circuit rider, and he kept journals most of his life.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, this is Judge Summers, and I hate to interrupt. Is there a question for the witness?
Yes, the question for the witness is that I disagree with his analysis of what the lost cause mythology is, and I'm fixing to state, I'm fixing to give a statement in rebuttal of what he says is the lost cause.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this portion of the hearing is really to ask questions of the witness. Comments about witness testimony should be reserved for deliberation, and you certainly will have ample opportunity to do that if there's something that you wish to discuss with your other commission members during deliberation. Do you have any specific questions for Dr. Frisbee that he can address?
Well, to try to form it into a question, so many of the other comments have been about factual happenings about General Forrest's activities. And my question would be, there are people, don't you think, that would disagree with your identification of what the lost cause is? And I base that on the record of a Methodist circuit rider named Jeremiah Cullum. And it does not correspond with what you're saying, that the lost cause mythology came after the war to make Southern people feel good about themselves and about how many of them were killed or wounded. And so I would like to quote that, if I may, Judge, because I think it does have relevance.
Ma'am, I would rather, well, I'm going to have to ask you not to do that because we're getting witness testimony, and questions asked to the witness and not introducing evidence in by commission members is not an appropriate use of our time. If you want to reference it during deliberation, that would be fine, but right now it would essentially be introduced as evidence into the record, not through witness testimony. So I'm going to have to ask that you refrain from doing so and ask Dr. Frisbee questions without referring to outside material.
Well, then if by your request and your judgment, I will wait until we do have deliberations, and I would like to make that statement at that time.
Do you have any questions for Dr. Frisbee?
No, I have no further questions for Dr. Frisbee.
Okay. Any other commission members have any questions? Ms. Allen?
May I just say something really quickly or no?
No.
In response to this?
No.
Okay.
Ms. Allen, any follow-up questions?
Yes, Your Honor. I have 2 follow-up questions for Dr. Frisbee. One, based on your testimony today, Dr. Frisbee, and the questions you've been asked by the commission members, is it fair to say that the life and career of Nathan Bedford Forrest is complex?
Complicated, complex, absolutely.
So in your opinion as an historian, is a museum an appropriate place, location to explore those complications and complexity?
I believe the museum is the best place to do that, yes, in this instance, for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Frisbee. Your Honor, I have nothing further for Dr. Frisbee.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Frisbee, for your testimony. And I believe, subject to correction from Ms. Allen, you are either free to go or remain as you see fit. Ms. Allen, your next witness.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Capitol Commission calls Ashley Howell.
Hello. Ms. Howell, if you would raise your right hand for me, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I can't see you yet, Ms. Howell, but good morning, and thank you for being with us today. Would you state your name and position for the record, please?
Yes. My name is Ashley Howell, and I am the executive director of the Tennessee State Museum.
How long have you served in that position?
Almost 4 years in this position.
Would you describe for the commission some of the responsibilities of your position?
Yes. First, just a little bit about the State Museum. The State Museum was founded in 1937 to oversee the state's collections. The mission of the State Museum is to procure, preserve, exhibit, and interpret objects which relate to the social, political, economic, and cultural history of Tennessee and of Tennesseans. So my position at the State Museum is that I manage the day-to-day operations of this process.
And Ms. Howell, does that include generally being responsible for the display of pieces in the museum collection?
Yes, it does.
As you know, we are here today on the State Capitol Commission's petition for waiver of the provisions of the Heritage Protection Act to relocate 3 busts from the State Capitol to the State Museum. And I will also refresh your recollection of the July 2020 State Capitol Commission meeting at which you appeared and I believe made a statement regarding that the busts were considered part of the museum collection. Could you elaborate on that or correct me if I'm wrong or go back through it?
Yes, so the busts are collections of the state and therefore under the stewardship of the State Museum.
Thank you. So that we are here on the petition, should the Historical Commission grant the petition for waiver and all the other steps that need to take place do take place, can you explain what the process would be for relocating the bust to the museum and for their eventual display?
Yes. So the process for display would be similar to our process for display of any object. And let me also say, I have a speech disorder, so if I need to repeat myself at any point, please let me know.
There'll be an assessment of the object. So that would be things like size, weight, display needs such as casework or mounts. Those would also be considered. But additionally, there'll be planning for the interpretation. 2 of the 3 individuals who are being discussed today are currently interpreted at the Tennessee State Museum, currently within the galleries. General Forrest has mentioned in the Tennessee Time Tunnel, Forging a Nation Gallery, and also in Civil War and Reconstruction. Admiral Gleaves has a large portrait in the Tennessee Time Tunnel, and this portrait was once hung in the state capitol and moved to the State Museum. For a Military Hall of Heroes, that would be a redesign of a gallery space, and it would involve additional planning, more so than putting objects in the current interpretation of the permanent collection galleries. A likely place for that hall could be the Tennessee War Memorial after it is able to be renovated. With a redesign of that magnitude, the State Museum would begin that planning process. We would involve scholars from across the state, as we do with exhibition planning. And additionally, if a military hall, I would also like to include veterans and serving military to be a part of that planning process. Additionally, we could look to temporary exhibition space at the main museum, but overall, our job at the State Museum is to preserve, to exhibit, and to interpret objects related to Tennessee and of Tennesseans, and that is our core function.
Thank you, Ms. Hell. I have no further questions for you at this time. I would turn it back over to Judge Summers. To see if the commission members have any questions. Don't know where Judge Summers is.
Judge Summers, I believe you're on mute.
I'm muted.
I'm sorry, I unmuted and it got muted again. So any questions from members of the commission?
Yes, Judge. My name is Beth Campbell. I'm the Middle Tennessee Vice Chair of the Commission. I would like to ask Ms. Howell a question.
Please do so.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Howell, for coming, and I want to compliment the State Museum. It is just a real star for Tennessee, and we have loved visiting the museum. When somewhere in all my the documentation sent to us, it was talked about your military hall of fame, or could you explain a little bit more how that's going to what do you envision for how that will look?
So I think in terms of sort of what that final iteration would look like, I think the first consideration would be space and where that would go. So would that be at the current State Museum? For a display of that size, I would say we would need significant space to be able to do that and to do that fully. I think a likely spot could be at the Tennessee War Memorial, where we also oversee the, Military Branch Museum. One of the things that I will mention to this commission is that the temperature and humidity conditions in that space currently are not ideal for display of collection. The State Museum has had to de-install many of the artifacts that have been on display and have updated interpretation, but it does not have as many artifacts on display there currently. But that is the space that is slated for renovation. And at that time, that would be the likely spot for a military hall of heroes. So I just mentioned that because in terms of expectations for display, I think that is a consideration that has to be taken into account, because that also comes in. Then we start discussing about collection care and collection management and the conditions for display.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I have a question, please.
You may proceed.
Ms. Howell, thanks for being here today. And I have a question, especially in relation to the Forrest bust. How would you visualize the interpretation?
Hello, excuse me. May I please be told who is asking the questions at the moment?
I'm sorry, who is speaking?
I'm not sure who that was.
Let her know you're in this room.
I am in the room, Your Honor. This is the chair of the commission, Dorita Williams.
I think somebody else had interrupted, though, and I'm not sure who that was.
That's what I do think we have someone else on the line also. Ms.
The
Howell,
reporter wanted some
thank you.
clarification.
Thank you. It's the court reporter. Thank you.
Okay. So I will, again, thank you for being here. But in regards to the Forrest bust especially, could you sort of, to put you on the spot, visualize how you would contextually reflect the total being of this person at the museum?
So if we are just discussing the Forrest bust, I think one of the things the museum could do is put the bust in context of the permanent collection galleries. Because in the permanent collection galleries, we discuss his legacy fully. And we have mentioned in the Forging a Nation gallery of Forrest as a slave trader. We also have a complete section of General Forrest in the Civil War gallery talking about his military career during the Civil War. And we also talk about him during Reconstruction. And so I think it's important that we tell a full story. Given the size of the bust, and that is one of the considerations that we have to think about in this display process, is where then could this sculpture go? And there are very limited options. It could work. But one of the things that, as we're thinking about exhibits and the display process, is the size of the artifact and how does that connect within the gallery space? I think because the Civil War and Reconstruction Gallery is the largest gallery at the State Museum, it would be a likely place for installation. Again, this is if we are just talking about the bust of General Forrest.
Thank you. Do you have other objects in the museum's collection that relates to Forrest?
We do. We have many objects related to General Forrest, and I don't have a specific number for you here today, but what I can tell you is that we have many objects currently on display related to General Forrest.
And also, in regards to the Farragut and Gleaves bust, you have objects that also belong and relate to both of those busts also in your collection?
That is correct. Specifically for the Gleaves bust, we have photographs of the bust with the sculptor. Those photographs are not on display. We also currently have the large portrait of Admiral Gleaves painted by Cornelius Hankins. This portrait is on display in the Tennessee Time Tunnel. This is a portrait that was on display at the state capitol. It was moved at some point to the State Museum. And so when there was an earlier discussion about a Naval Hall of Heroes, there is mention of this Hall of Heroes in the state capitol to accompany this portrait. So it's definitely tied with that history as well. I'll mention too, we have many items within the collection, though not currently on display, related to Admiral Farragut.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Ms. Howell, for your testimony. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Allen, any follow-up questions?
No, Your Honor, I have nothing further for this witness.
Ms. Howell, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Any additional witnesses, Ms. Allen?
No, Your Honor, the Capitol Commission rests. I do have a brief closing I'd like to make.
Okay, do you want to make your closing now or at the end of the public comment period?
I think I'll defer to the end of the public comment period. Thank you for asking.
Appropriate.
Thank you.
I believe we now turn this proceeding back over to the Commission for public comment.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I would like to turn the meeting over to Jacqueline Matupie. Thank you, Judge Summers. Again, Jacqueline Matupie is with the Office of External Affairs, and she will be moderating today's comment period, and she's going to give some guidelines to the commenters. Ms. Matupie, I'm going to turn. I'm not sure who's speaking.
Court reporter. Court
reporter. Yes.
Court reporter, who it is.
What is she asking?
For you to identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. This was the Dorita Williams, the chair of the Tennessee Historical Commission. For benefit of the court reporter, and I'm now turning the meeting over for the public comment portion to our moderator, Ms. Matupie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, I'm Jacqueline Matupie with the Office of External Affairs. And as Madam Chair noted, I'll be moderating today's comment period, serving as a neutral party. As noted in the public notice, only persons that requested to comment before the deadline of 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, March 3rd, 2021, will be able to do so today. For your convenience, on the screen, you will see a list of those who have requested to comment and in the order they will be speaking. Please take note of where you are approximately in this list so that you can plan accordingly. During the comment period, a timer will be shown on the screen, not the list, so please review this now. We've asked the public to turn off their cameras to help with bandwidth, but please feel free to activate your camera during your comment if you'd like. We ask that you keep your comments focused on the topic of this case. No threats or insults will be tolerated. For purposes of the public record, we ask that you please state your name and any organization you are representing before commenting. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to comment, and we will strictly be enforcing this time limit, and we'll have a timer displayed on the screen so that you can manage your time accordingly. Please note that you will be muted if you go over your allotted time. For those that are calling in, I will inform you when you have 1 minute left and when you are out of time. I will state the name of the first person that will be speaking, as well as calling the name of the next person so that they can prepare accordingly. If you've logged into WebEx, you can unmute yourself by pressing the microphone button on the lower bottom portion of your screen. And if you're having bandwidth issues, we recommend that you turn your camera off, or you can call in. Our first 2 citizen comments today are Bill Carey and Larrick Johnson. Bill Carey, you have 3 minutes to speak once the timer begins.
Attorney, before that starts, may I ask a question?
Certainly.
There will be no exchange between commissioners and testimonials, correct?
Correct. These are just comments back to back.
Thank you.
And Larrick Johnson, you are next in the queue to speak. Bill Carey, please unmute your mic, state your name and any organization you represent if you are calling in to let us know so we can alert you when the 1 minute, and then when you are at time. And to remind you, you can dial *6 to unmute yourself if you've called in. The floor is yours. Mr. Carey, are you present?
Wait, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Okay, here we go. Some of you know me through things I've done in the world of Tennessee history, but I'm here today because I've been a Tennessee resident for 33 years, and I used to be a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy. Tennessee does more to honor its military heroes from the 19th century than it does to honor its heroes from the 20th century. There is nothing in the state named for Nashville native General Frank Andrews, the man for whom Andrews Air Force Base is named. There are no statues of Admiral William Lawrence, who spent 6 years in a Vietnamese prisoner of war camp where he wrote the Tennessee State poem. Few Tennesseans seem to know that the skipper of the first submarine to go to the North Pole was Tennessean William Anderson. About 2 years ago, I became friends with Representative Sam Whitson, who used to be a colonel in the U.S. Army. He and I started talking about doing more for Tennessee's military tradition. As part of this effort, I researched the history of the statues at the state capitol. Here's what I found. In 1944, the Historical Commission announced plans to create a gallery of Tennessee naval heroes between the House and Senate chamber. This gallery was to include, among others, World War I hero Admiral Albert Gleaves, Admiral David Farragut, and Matthew Murray. It was because of these plans that these statues were placed in the Capitol. But that was it. The Hall of Naval Heroes fizzled after that. Why? I really don't know. Around 1973, Senator Henry decided it was unfair to have a statue of Farragut, who was in the U.S. Navy, but not one of Forrest. Fundraising fell to the Sons of Confederate Veterans, who raised the money for the statue that is there now. That was it as far as military people being enshrined at the Capitol. I think we can assume that from now on, people enshrined up there will be political or cultural figures. Howard Baker, Dolly Parton, and Lois DeBerry come to mind. Colonel Whitson and I have come up with a plan under which a Hall of Military Service under the State Museum would honor military achievement for all time periods. A place where people could learn about the military contributions of people such as Farragut, Lawrence, George Jordan, and others. And yes, where the military contributions of Forrest would be on display as well. The hallways of the state capitol is for presidents, legislators, and governors and cultural figures. It's not a place to honor someone for helping ships travel around the world, for taking a submarine to the North Pole, or for leading a cavalry force to defeat a naval force. Forrest, Farragut, and Andrews belong in a military hall. And I also suggest that this hall of service be presided over by a board of actual U.S. military veterans. One final point. Colonel Whitson and I came up with this plan about 18 months ago, but we didn't get very far with it when we first tried to launch it. In any case, this idea did not come out of the events of last year. This is not our way of getting rid of the Forrest statue. In fact, it is our idea for Tennessee to do a better job than it currently does of recognizing this remarkable tradition of military service. Thank you.
Good morning. Do I start?
Sorry, yes. Next, we have Robert Jackson to speak, and after Robert Jackson, we'll have Angel Stransberry with the People's Plaza. Mr. Jackson, the floor is yours.
This is Robert Jackson. The second person to speak is Johnson.
I'm sorry. Okay, sorry for the confusion. Robert Jackson, you are next.
I'm
sorry.
Good morning. This is Larrick, Larrick Johnson. I just want to add some notes to the historical comments on General Forrest. Of course, Nathan didn't want to be born out here, but he did. And they moved to North Mississippi. The biggest thing is, I have to say, though, there's family tragedy there. Being the oldest of 7 and having the family hit with typhoid fever at 17, he lost his father, his twin sister, and his younger sister. His brothers and his mom, they put it together, and they go ahead, and he becomes, a farmer and productive. He's at a livery stable with his uncle. His uncle gets shot in a dispute over a loan, and now he's got to pick up the family and continue. Now we get into the issue of the black community, where he's a slave trader. And of course, the first thing you hear about that is it is not an honorable trade. But it is noted in the books and in history that he treated his slaves a little bit better than most. Immediately taking a bath, putting clothes on them, giving them trades. I think some of that is lost in the narrative, that he's like that. Or the fact that he had 22 Afro-Americans ride with him throughout the war, and only one went unauthorized absent at the end. He gave him an opportunity. Some of them actually went back with him and did farming at the end of the dance of the war. Fort Pillow, I don't know what to say. That shouldn't even had to happen. Sherman had closed the fort in January, if we look at the history books. But Halliburton, the corrupt general, wanted to open it for contraband. He took that Union unit and put them in a place they couldn't be defended. I mean, the general came in there and offered them surrender. They chose not to surrender. Not once, but twice. Unfortunately, we had some atrocities. I get it. That being said, that other Union unit over there, that cavalry, was not a military unit. That was kind of like the Home Guard. And they were running around in Tipton County doing some atrocities before that battle. That was known. Lastly, the KKK, he was trying to do the right thing. He shouldn't have did the right thing. He should have just stayed home in Mississippi and did his farming. Lastly, when he passed, let me not forget, please try to read his surrender speech, and please try to read the pallbearer speech. Reconciliation there. And then when he passed, close to 300 Afro-Americans showed up at the funeral. Who does that in Memphis, other than the times change? I appreciate you listening to my comments. I would vote for him to stay on the big picture, but I know that's not going to happen. Everybody have a good day. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Sorry for the confusion on order. Next up, we have Robert Jackson and then Angel Stransberry with the People's Plaza. Mr. Jackson, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Commissioners, if it ain't clear yet, we sure are not meeting in person today, nor are we meeting on the mountaintop. Because I know that on the mountaintop, everybody agrees that Black Lives Matter. And as we just heard, everybody would have the confidence to consider what an honest accounting of our nation's history requires of each of us today. And today, this petition takes the overdue step to remove the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust from the state capitol, but it is partially flawed, as it requires that the State Museum place the bust in a heroes exhibit, a military heroes exhibit at that. And nowhere is the fact clearer that Forrest wasn't a military hero than at Fort Pillow, where 300 Black Union soldiers surrendered themselves to troops under the command of Nathan Bedford Forrest, only to be slaughtered. He was a war criminal, slave owner, Klansman, and Confederate general, and as such, he must be removed from the state capitol. In 1861, Confederate Vice President Alexander Stephens said in his famous cornerstone speech that the simple cornerstone of the Confederacy was that Black people were inferior to white people. So was it heroic for Forrest to fight to keep Black people as being inferior to white people, or was it heroic for him to commit treason against America? Now, I've heard it said today that this will only be to honor him as a military tactician. But I tell you, I have been to the Holocaust Museum, and I don't think we're missing anything by not having an exhibit to honor the military tacticians that made up the Nazis. And that's because we have the moral clarity to not mistake a fight for evil over there. And today we need the moral clarity to not mistake a fight for evil over here. And that is what your vote will be about today. So at a minimum, the Historical Commission should exercise its authority pursuant to the Tennessee Heritage Protection Act, Title 4, Chapter 1, Part 412, Section 8B, specifically to provide clarifying instructions to the State Museum to ensure that nobody viewing the exhibit could leave with the impression that Forrest was a hero in his time, nor is a hero in ours. Because understand, your vote today is a present statement on who is a hero in Tennessee, what you can do, what you can't do, and be a hero. The Confederate flag was unfurled in our nation's capital on January 6th when we weren't fighting the Civil War. If it ain't clear yet that we need moral clarity on this issue, by God, I don't know what will get it through our minds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Next, we have Angel Stransberry with the People's Plaza, and after that, Robert Riddle.
Hello, I'm Angel Stansberry. I represent the People's Plaza. 2 months ago, we saw the Confederate flag displayed in our U.S. Capitol for the first time in our nation's history. We saw a protester wearing a Camp Auschwitz shirt, racial slurs being hurled at Black Capitol officers, hundreds injured and 5 killed. The dangerous rhetoric glamorizing the Confederacy and leading to this deadly insurrection is nothing new. And I am disturbed to hear these echoes coming from a member of this commission. Further, it is my understanding that Ms. Moore is actually a resident of Mississippi. Since this is a matter concerning the great state of Tennessee and its residents, I would like to petition the commission to have Ms. Joanne Moore recuse herself from voting on this matter. As an archaeologist myself, I would hold that biased accounts from historians who are Confederate sympathizers do not constitute archaeological evidence. And I agree with Dr. Frisbee's definition of the lost cause position. Following the Civil War, many Southern writers glorified Confederate leaders as heroic patriots and Christian soldiers. And this skewed narrative was adopted by the Daughters of the Confederacy, who produced textbooks which were used in many Southern institutions. Such textbooks undermine the horrors faced by Black people at the hands of violent white mobs throughout the South, and particularly between 1877 and 1940. This counter-narrative still infects the minds of many white Southerners with a narrative of Southern triumph, but it is due to an incomplete telling of history. As we know, the Klan was started by a group of Confederate veterans in Pulaski, Tennessee on Christmas Eve, 1865. In Germany, denazification began almost immediately following the fall of the Third Reich. In fact, an Allied order in 1946 declared illegal any symbol which tended to preserve and keep alive the German military tradition, to revive militarism, or to commemorate the Nazi Party. It is my fervent hope that we have not yet lost our capacity to learn from countries like Germany. The descendants of victimized African Americans deserve to be able to visit their state capital and not immediately recoil at an image which embodies the gruesome horror of a not-so-distant nightmare. This bust was initially proposed by Senator Douglas Henry, a Democrat, in 1973, a mere 8 years following the passage of the Voting Rights Act. It has been in the state capitol since at least 1978. Its placement was not born of some impetus to promote history of heroes. Rather, it was emblematic of a pushback on the recent influx of Black voter participation within the state elections. Last July was overwhelmingly decided that the bust be removed. Governor Lee added, "Symbols matter. Proclamations and statues are not just snapshots of our history. They are a window into what we value. Given the array of obstacles employed in blocking the removal of this statue, what do we truly value and protect as a society? And how I wish that Black bodies were shown half the reverence afforded to this unfeeling bust of stone." Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stransberry. Next, we have Robert Riddle and then Wayne Dominguez.
My name is Robert Riddle. I'm unmuted, I trust.
Yes, sir.
Mom often sent me to clean my room with the old saying, "A place for everything and everything in its place." Our Capitol building is a unique place. It's a place for legislation where laws are passed. It's a place with courtrooms to enforce those laws. In the hallways of that unique place we have a chance to recognize heroes in statesmanship, as well as heroes who championed our courts as a place to provide equal justice. Of course, we need to recognize other types of historical figures. For them, Tennessee has an outstanding museum. There we can honor giants in the field of commerce and industry and the field of battle. This proper sense of place and everything in its place is the key reason I speak today. Please approve this waiver to allow the transfer of the 3 military leaders to their proper place in the Tennessee State Museum. This transfer is critical for a second reason. After his military service, one of these 3 military giants played a central role in founding the Ku Klux Klan. What do we imply, we Tennesseans, if our Capitol building showcases someone whose behavior contributed to the oppression of an entire race of people? How must that affect our fellow citizens whose ancestors were brutalized in part by the person we honor today in our special place where laws are made and justice is rendered? What must those citizens expect when they look to our Capitol building for fairness in our laws and justice in our courtrooms? It's not generally useful to label another person as a racist, but we should not mince words about a policy that is racist. Keeping the Forrest bust in our Capitol building is a way for one racial group to display dominance over another. In a building where laws are made and courtrooms host trials, it promotes one racial group at the direct expense of a second racial group. That is the exact definition of systemic racism in a government policy. Tennessee deserves better. As a historical commission, you can help us come together in paying our respects to each type of historic figure, both statesmen and generals, but each must be honored in their proper place. I ask you today, every member of the commission, to approve this petition for waiver. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riddle. Next, we have Wayne Dominguez, and next after that, Mary Claire Highland. Mr. Dominguez, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Tennessee Historical Commission. I cannot believe that there is still an argument to be made for keeping a bust of a Confederate general who massacred thousands in our state capital. What especially concerns me, however, is the amount of our elected officials who are using the Christian Bible and the Christian faith to justify their ignorance and bigotry. Nathan Bedford Forrest was not a true follower of Christ, as he never implemented the most important commandment, loving the Lord your God through loving your neighbor. He knew that what he was doing was wrong and wanted to save himself at the last minute by asking Jesus to save him. However, as Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount, those who practice lawlessness while proclaiming his name are not true followers of his. Since these types of Christians love to twist the scripture so much, let me read to you what it says in Matthew 7, 1-5 and 15-23. Judge not that you not be judged, for with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite. First, remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them. And not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. I hope that through the words of the man that you claim to follow, you will see that not only is Nathan Bedford Forrest not worth your time to defend, but that you will also see that if Jesus were alive today, you would be the Pharisees and Sadducees, not the apostles that you claim to be. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dominguez. Next, we have Mary Claire Highland, and after that, Julianne Adams. The floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Mary Claire Highland, and I am a lifelong Tennessean. When you erect a bust of a Confederate general in our state capitol, you must consider the memorial of all Tennesseans. You must consider the children ripped away from their parents, the families separated by Nathan Bedford Forrest in his time as a slave trader. You must consider the hundreds of surrendered Union soldiers at Fort Pillow that died under Nathan Bedford Forrest's direct orders. This, by modern terms, would make Forrest a war criminal. Forrest's actions dictate him a traitor to his own country, a coward, and unworthy of veneration in our state capitol. Surely, I do not have to educate the Historical Commission on Forrest and his history of white supremacy. Forrest's position as a Confederate general and as first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan is enough to disqualify him from this place of honor. This bust and the hatred it represents has no place in our capital, nor in the 21st century. Regardless of how many battles Forrest won for the Confederacy, his memory is not one deserving of this place of honor. This bust represents intolerance, white supremacy, and hatred. This monument has been continually protested since its erection, and I will not rest until it is gone. This symbol of Confederate hatred creates a hostile environment for communities of color and reveres Forrest's traitorous actions to his country. We all deserve to know our history, but we do not need a racist bust to remind us of things we already know. This bust deserves to be represented in the State Museum, where our history can be taught in a manner that does not ostracize our Black and brown communities. How we represent our past dictates our future as a state. We cannot let these vicious symbols of hatred continue to leave their mark on our citizens. Forrest is no hero to Tennesseans like me, and I ask that you vote to remove this bust and take it to the State Museum where it can be displayed in its proper context. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Highland. Next, we have Julianne Adams. After that, Alan Ramsher, representing Tennessee for Historical Justice. Julianne Adams, the floor is yours.
My name is Julianne Adams, and I speak as a resident of Nashville and an academic with degrees from Columbia, Oxford, and Vanderbilt. My research focuses on the emotional resonances of literature and art between the 18th and 21st century, and how particular aesthetics help create feelings of community. To be clear, my specialty is how old things affect how we feel today. History is a living, breathing entity that we interact with, but also create on a daily basis. History does not require statues. We do not bring statues into the classroom. We have memories and words and our own physical bodies to remember. We have these tools now to shape the legacy of this moment by approving the State Capitol Commission waiver and removing the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest from the state capitol. The Capitol is intended to represent its current citizens, not perform its past. For that, we have archives and museums. Fred Moten, an eminent Black studies scholar, has written on the auditory quality of images depicting white violence against Black bodies. Moten writes that a photo of Emmett Till's horrifically mangled body continues to scream as viewers continue to mourn when they see this image. I believe that, likewise, the sound of Nathan Bedford Forrest screams beyond the Capitol, telling Black citizens of Tennessee that they should live in fear, that the first Grand Wizard of the KKK is still murdering their ancestors and is coming for their bodies next. Have you ever looked at an old photograph and felt a spark of recognition or feeling, a sense in your body that something in the past is speaking to you? Yes, of course you have. We all have seen ourselves in photographs, statues, art. On some level, you agree with me. You know art has power. Denying the waiver is a denial of your own capacity to feel. I implore you to approve the Capitol Commission's waiver to move the busts of Forrest, Farragut, and Gleaves to protect history, because history has already recorded Forrest deeds, but as it stands, this historical moment is only recording Tennessee's lack of feeling for its current people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Alan Ramsher, representing Tennessee for Historical Justice. After that, we have Justin Canoe. The floor is yours.
May it please the convention. This is Alan Ramsher. I am the treasurer of Tennessee for Historical Justice, which today focuses on counsel to This is for historical justice. For those of you who don't know, it's an organization which is committed to uncovering the truth regarding racial violence in Tennessee. With an eye towards
Excuse me.
affiliation.
Mr. Ramsey.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's difficult to hear.
I can't understand what he's saying. It's muffled, like he's muffled, and I can't hear him.
Mr. Ramsey, are you able to speak closer to your mic?
Is this better?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So are we restarting or?
For public record for the court reporter, if you could start over, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Okay. This is Alan Ramsey. I am the treasurer of Tennesseans for Historical Justice. And for purposes today, I am counsel to THJ. THJ is an organization committed to uncovering the truth regarding racial violence in Tennessee, with an eye towards conciliation and healing. I'll just pause here. Everybody hear me okay?
You can continue to lean in close to the mic. That'll be great.
Okay. THJ is involved to support efforts to remove any issue of honor for Native Bedford Forest from Tennessee public space, including the removal of the bus from the Capitol. I believe that Tennessee has a compelling public interest in seeking racial conciliation, and the presence of the bus at the center of our government is a barrier for such conciliation. It should be removed from the alcove on the second floor of the Capitol. The bus represents for me a painful memory, a haunting sound of slaves being tortured, of soldiers being and
Mr. Ramsey, can you pause? The court reporter is still having difficulty hearing you.
okay.
Can you lean in?
I don't know where to pick up. I'll go back to the presence of the bus at the center of our government is a barrier to conciliation and should be removed from the alcove on the second floor of the Capitol. The pain, the memory, the haunting sound of abuse and soldiers being massacred, homes and families being terrorized should not be part of that conversation when people go to work and in our capital. We urge the removal of the statue of Bedford Forest and from the state capitol, and we support anything the commission or the museum wants to do with that statue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Justin Canoe. After Justin Canoe, we have Justin Jones.
Excuse me, Ms. Marr. Just so you know, I didn't get anything that he said. If he wants to come back and repeat it, I can take it, but I could not understand. It sounds like he's going to fail, and I had major problems hearing him. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Thanks for that. Mr. Ramsher, are you able to call in and we can have you make your statement again so the court reporter can capture it? Is that possible? The number is to call in is on the WebEx invite. Can you confirm that you can do that? Otherwise, we won't be able to capture your comment for public record. You're muted, sir. You're muted, sir.
This is the 415-655-0003.
I don't have it in front of me, but it's on the invite on the public record. If you go to the same screen where you got the link, you can call it.
I have the agenda here.
Terrific. So after this comment, after Justin Canoe, I'll return back to you, and if you can call in, you'll have better reception.
Okay.
Thank you. Justin Canoe, thanks for your patience. You have, the floor is yours.
My name, excuse me, my name is Justin Canoe. I'm the grandson of Harry and Jean Grundman. 177373 and A15019 were the numbers on their respective arms from the Nazi concentration camps they were held in, one of which was Auschwitz. They didn't talk about it much, but I can still remember seeing those tattoos as we grew up, a constant reminder of what happened to them during World War II. They both thankfully survived, and as a result, I'm able to be here talking with you today. In the years after the war, Germany came to acknowledge it had been on the wrong side of history, and that the Nazis and Hitler represented something truly dark and evil, the dehumanization of human beings that resulted in the deaths of 6 million Jews. As a result, there are no Nazi statues holding places of honor in Germany. There are no swastikas lifted up proudly or looked back on fondly by the government. But here in America, and in Tennessee specifically, we have a national shame of our own. That national shame is slavery, which was also the subjugation and dehumanization of people, black people. Despite what some of even our current legislators refuse to accept or admit, the Civil War was indeed fought to preserve slavery in America. If you don't believe me, Rep. Mike Sparks of Rutherford County, take it from the states themselves. Mississippi's secession statement said, "Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery." Texas, "The servitude of the African race is abundantly authorized and justified." Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy, said, "With us, all of the white race are equal in the eyes of the law, not so with the Negro. Subordination is his place." Yes, the Civil War was about slavery, and Forrest was a Confederate general who fought to preserve it and who massacred black soldiers at Fort Pillow, then went on to be the first Grand Wizard of the KKK and terrorized black Americans. No matter how much remorse they claim he later felt, these are facts. He is no hero. Our own state museum literally refers to him as a terrorist. I can't speak to what it must be like for black Tennesseans, including your own colleagues, to walk by this KKK Grand Wizard statue in a place of honor. But I can tell you, if the state were honoring Nazi generals instead of Confederate ones, including the very first leader of a group that terrorized Jews after the war, that message being sent to me and my family would be that Tennessee doesn't care about all of its people, only the white ones. So in my view, the question before this commission today is, do you care how black people feel? Do you want them to feel welcome in their own home? This should not be a difficult decision. You are the Tennessee Historical Commission. Please, I implore you, choose to be on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn back to Mr. Ramsher. Are you able to call in? You can dial *6 to unmute yourself.
How's that?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. I apologize to the commission and to everybody else waiting for the inconvenience. I'm Alan Ramsher. I'm a treasurer and counsel for the Tennessean.
Mr. Ramsher, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you please mute your computer mic so you don't get reverb?
How's that?
Better, thank you.
Okay. Okay. I'm Alan Ramsher, treasurer and counsel for the THJ is an organization committed to uncovering the truth regarding racial violence in Tennessee with an eye to conciliation and healing. In keeping with this mission, THJ supports efforts to remove any indicia of honor for Nathan Bedford Forrest from Tennessee's public space including removal of the bust from the Capitol. We believe that Tennessee has a compelling public interest in seeking racial conciliation. The presence of the bust at the center of our government is a barrier to such conciliation and should be removed from the alcove on the second floor of the Capitol. The pain of the memory of slavery, the haunting sound of the massacred soldiers do not belong in this conversation. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Justin Jones, and after that, we have Rebecca Blevins.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Before proceeding, I just feel like a movement of the spirit. I just want to lift up those ancestors who are bearing witness to this moment. I think we've talked a lot about Nathan Bedford Forrest, and I know that some people are still trying to make this about him, but really it's about those who feel the pain of what that statue is. So I want to lift up the ancestors who built our Capitol, who are not named or honored in it. I want to lift up those who were massacred at Fort Pillow. I want to lift up those who had endured cross burnings of the Klan and racial terrorism. I want to lift up Revis Mitchell, a member of your own commission who recently passed away, was one of my dear professors at Fisk, who voted for the removal of the statue in 2017 as an African-American and a historian who saw the violence and the lack of historical truth in it. I want to lift up Kwame Leo Lillard, a freedom rider and Nashville civil rights leader who passed recently as well, who was one of the two young men arrested protesting the statue in 1979 when it was unveiled, when Black Tennesseans saw what it was and said that we cannot allow that to happen in silence. I want to lift up Dr. Charles Kimbrough, who was the president of the Nashville NAACP in 1979, where the same week the statue went up, a cross was burned outside the Nashville NAACP office, not in the 50s or 60s, but in 1979. I think that this is the truth of what the statue represents. It represents terrorism. It represents a lack of remorse from our white brethren in our state to really see the truth in what we feel every time we walk by it. When Black children have to walk by a statue of a man who sought to enslave their ancestors. I think what we have to tell the truth on today is that this is not just about a statue. I think we see a lot of resistance to this removal, and we've seen it for since it was put up, because really to remove it would be to apologize to Black Tennesseans for your complicity and for your lineage of what this statue represents, and that is white supremacy. And so I hope that today that this statue, that this vote proceeds. It's been a long time coming. I remember the first time I protested the statue was after the massacre in Charleston, where Dylan Roof, bearing a Confederate flag and ascribing to that ideology, massacred 9 church members of that church. When I see this statue, I think of Charlottesville, where white supremacists, again, engaged in terrorism to defend symbols of like this. I see this summer in the protests that swept our nation. I think that, it's very good that our governor has finally come out to say that he supports removal, but we know that nothing would have happened without public pressure. And so what's happening today is really about people power. It's really about the hope of a multiracial democracy instead of this myth of a Southern aristocracy that is whitewashed and erases anybody who's not a white male Protestant. And so I think that I would like to just end by saying, that I hope that members of this commission will not continue to try and defend what the statue represents. I heard a member who tried to defend the myth of
Thank you, sir.
The lost cause.
Thank you, sir.
And I just hope that we tell the truth. Thank you.
We're at time. Thank you so much. Next, we have Rebecca Blevins and then Graham Moat. Rebecca, the floor is yours.
It's a court reporter again. Can we get the people at the 615-253 number to mute their microphone? Because I'm getting noise from there.
To mute, yes, we can do that, court reporter. Mr. Joe Sanders, can you mute the room from the podium, please? Thank you so much.
Can't hear her.
Number that one. That one.
Rebecca Blevins, are you present? We are going to move on to Graham Mute. And after Graham Mute, we have Shauna Russell. Graham Mute, are you present?
Hello, yeah, Graham Moat.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to, I thank you, I appreciate all the comments that everybody's been making, some great statements so far. I am a Metro public school teacher, and I frequently bring students to the Tennessee State Capitol, as well as the War Memorial and War Museum on field trips. And every year that we've done that, there has been questions from our students about why there's a statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest there. And there really isn't ever a satisfactory explanation given by the people who are giving the tours or the people who are there. So I just wanted to call to attention that teenagers, students are aware of this, and it makes them feel extremely unwelcome and that they are not a part of our democracy. Here we go. I had some other comments I wanted to make. I wanted to give some context of why I'm opposed to the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest being displayed in the Tennessee State Capitol. My Tennessee roots run deep. My father was born here in Nashville. His mother was born here. Her parents were both born here. All of them have passed away now, and no one alive ever met my great-grandparents as they died about 100 years ago. My great-great-grandfather was Dennis Sullivan. He was born in 1834 in County Cork, Ireland. I only learned about him this year while researching on Ancestry.com. That far back in my ancestry, there are 31 other people that I'm equally related to. At some point, my great-great-grandfather migrated to the United States as a young man. He repaid his adopted country by taking up arms against the government of the country that welcomed him. His skills as a soldier were about as bad as his judgment, and his regiment lost the Battle of Fort Donelson early in the war, February 16th, 1862. He was captured as a prisoner of war. When he was released, he went directly back to war again, once again losing the Battle of Missionary Ridge near Chattanooga, Tennessee, November 25th, 1863. This two-time loser ancestor of mine also lost the war when our government and the Army of the United States of America, carrying the flag that I say the Pledge of Allegiance to every day at the school that I work at, finally defeated the racist traitors of the South. As a white ancestor of a Civil War soldier, I stand firmly against the glorification and memorializing of racist and immoral traitors that took up arms against our government. They are an embarrassment to my family and heritage. No one I know has ever even knew anyone who met my great-great-grandfather. This goes to show that people who act like they are offended by the erasure of Confederate monuments are only doing so to further spread white supremacist agendas. They don't have any direct emotional relationship to any of these people. Please allow the majority of us.
Thank you, sir. You're at time.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Shauna Russell. After Shauna Russell, we have Jim Mogamot with Veterans for Peace. Shauna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Shauna Russell. I am a lifelong Tennessee educator and organizer with Workers Against Racism. We would first like to thank the administrative staff of the Tennessee Historical Commission for documenting the 1,014 letters sent by Tennesseans supporting the removal of the Forrest bust. On behalf of Workers Against Racism, note that the people are unmoved by bargains for absolution of individual guilt. We are not here to debate individuals, but rather systems. For example, Senator Joe Hensley's claim, who stated during the State Capitol Commission vote to file this waiver last summer that, quote unquote, very few Confederate soldiers owned slaves is not germane to our cause. Under capitalism, this is no surprise. The people who fight wars are seldom the ruling class of the economic interests they give and take lives to protect. Similarly, we do not entertain apocryphal suggestions that Nathan Bedford Forrest had black friends at the end of his life or kissed a black woman once. We are here to denounce symbols and monuments to white supremacy, impact, the holistic analysis of a life funded by human trafficking who impacted thousands, the funding process by which neo-Confederate hate group Sons of Confederate Veterans installed this symbol. We are unmoved by pleas to haggle over individual choices in the dust of a life that suggests a change of heart. It is irrelevant to us if there is a fleeting change of heart, as the impact and legacy of that heart remain, and those who have carried on this mantle remain, including commissioner members who sympathize with and or hold dual memberships in the Sons of Confederate Veterans today. And yes, we are very relieved that Judge David Tipton and his dual membership as of this year no longer serve on the THC. Whereas Tennessee was the last state to secede from the Union, this is our legacy. Yet here we are, one of the last states to make any significant change or reconfiguration of Confederate monuments. South Carolina, Mississippi, where is Tennessee? To the white THC voting members and their allies who are perhaps still clinging to yet another mythical lost cause, in this case, the defense of this monument, though you are my skinfolk, you are not my kinfolk. And Commission member Joanne Cullen Moore, as a resident of Arkansas, you are not even anyone here's state folk. To you all, Doug and company especially, if the Black voices and Black bodies that have been testifying to you all at this time have not been enough to sway your vote, your humanity is the lost cause. I hope that today you have the humility, at least, to recognize you have not been listening and the fear of your maker to abstain. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jim Mogamot with Veterans for Peace. After that, we have Melissa Cherry with Showing Up for Racial Justice from the Nashville chapter. Jim, the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Jim Wolgamuth, and I am a Vietnam Navy veteran and member of Veterans for Peace, the Hector Black chapter here in Nashville. Veterans for Peace is an international organization of military veterans and allies whose collective efforts are to use our experiences as veterans and lift our voices in the causes of peace and justice. We have more than 140 chapters across the country, and they're all paying attention to what's going on right now, right here. We are an ally to organizations that promote peace and justice, and that is why we have held vigils on April 12th to remember the victims of Fort Pillow. That is why we generated a petition and gained more than 2,000 signatures from persons of humanity asking that the bust be removed. That is why we scheduled an appointment with Leader Cassida to deliver that petition while a group of young African-American students were turned away. That is why we are here today, because while symbolic, the removal of the bust would be an important step for Tennessee state government to take to show that they understand that they are here to represent all the people of Tennessee. We have seen a bipartisan condemnation of the January 6th insurrection at our nation's capital and widespread condemnation of President Trump, who incited that violence, even from the Republican majority leader in the Senate. And yet, here we are in Tennessee, still debating whether we should honor a rebel uniformed insurrectionist and the heritage that that bust represents. Virginia has taken down Confederate statues along Monument Avenue. South Carolina removed the Confederate flag from the grounds of the state capitol. Mississippi is remaking their flag without the Confederacy. Alabama is the home of a beautiful anti-lynching memorial, and that is just a start. So why should Tennessee lag behind other states in honoring and respecting all people? I'm asking you to remove the bust on behalf of all the people of Tennessee and to put it in the museum where the history, the heritage, and the truth about that bust and about Forrest can fully be explained. Thanks.
Thank you. Now we have Melissa Cherry. After Melissa Cherry, we have Christy Arth. Melissa, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Melissa Cherry. I'm a third-generation Tennessee resident. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and as a representative of Showing Up for Racial Justice, the Nashville chapter. My great-grandfather was a basket weaver and a sharecropper. At this time, his baskets are on display in a state park here in Tennessee. And every time I visit, I'm reminded by the name of that park, the history that we are still trying to erase today. Facebook, our current millennial historian, reminded me that 8 years ago today, I stood at the foot of the Lincoln Monument and viewed with admiration the Washington Monument. Our nation's capital is full of reminders of the bold actions and figures that formed our democracy. You'll find no such monument there in our nation's capital to memorialize Nathan Bedford Forrest, because by modern terms, he would only be described as a war criminal. Forrest's actions dictate him a traitor to his own country, a coward and unworthy of veneration in our state capital. Any inscription of such a monument to Bedford Forrest would have to read as follows. Nathan Bedford Forrest, alive July 13th, 1821 to October 29th, 1877, was a prominent Confederate Army general during the American Civil War. He and his troops were responsible for the massacre of over 300 surrendered, mostly Black Union troops stationed at Fort Pillow in Tennessee in April 1864. Within 3 years, he would become the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, holding that title from 1867 to 1869. After mismanaging his fortune, he lived out his life managing a plantation manned by convict labor. This bust represents intolerance, white supremacy, and hatred, and has been continuously protested since its erection in 1974. We will not rest until it's gone. Taking down this monument is not about erasing our history, it is about addressing our history from a place of truthfulness and accountability. For this is the only way to move forward. How we represent our past dictates our future as a state and as a nation. Truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues. Act today to restore at the seat of our capital a dedication to truth, because without it, reconciliation and progress will be impossible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Christy Arth. After that, we have Griffin Price.
Hi, my name is Christy Arth, and I'm an assistant professor of law. I should say that my comments today represent my own personal views, and I'm not here in a representative capacity for my employer. I decided to offer public comment today not to urge you to take one course of action or the other, but to urge you to think through your decision through the lens of public art. I got interested in this subject through some linguistic research I did, where I studied the judicial opinions resulting from Confederate monument removal cases nationwide. I was interested in whether and how the judges addressed these monuments as public artworks and how public art theory might better inform our understanding of this issue. That scholarship was recently published by the Gonzaga Law Review, and I think it bears on the work of the commission today given the statutory standard. As you know, the Tennessee Heritage Protection Act allows for a petition process to obtain a waiver that allows for the removal of a memorial from public property. Such a petition should be granted where it is supported by reports showing a material or substantial need for a waiver based on a compelling public interest. One of the public interests the commission should consider is the interest that Tennesseans have in the public art that creates our public spaces. My scholarship looked at 3 of the public purposes that public art can serve. 1, the historic value proposition, this idea of art as monuments. What are we commemorating or co-remembering as a community together through this artwork? 2, the functional value proposition, the idea of art as amenity. How are we utilizing the art as a community? Since public artwork is considered the government speech legally, is the message being sent by the people's government, understood by and considerate of the entire electorate? And 3, the democratic value proposition, the idea of art as the agora. How is this artwork contributing to or detracting from the work of a democracy? I told you at the top of my comments that I wanted to urge you to think through this decision through the lens of public art. And so I'll end, like all good law professors do, with a hypothetical. Imagine that the state of Tennessee were to put out an open call to artists for proposals to fill the display cases in the state capitol today. If the artist Laura Jane Herndon Baxendale had submitted a bid proposing to cast Nathan Bedford Forrest bust in bronze as the public artwork, would her piece be the one we selected as a community to display in the state capitol today? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have up Griffin Price. After that, we have Shania Williams. Griffin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Griffin Price, and I'm representing myself as a resident of Nashville. This bust, Nathan Bedford Forrest, has no historical or cultural value and has no place enshrined in our state capitol. The bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest, while depicting a historical figure, is anything but itself historically significant. Dedicated to the Capitol in 1978, perhaps a more fitting subject for historical preservation might be the Rubik's Cube, bell-bottom jeans, a disco ball, Dolly Parton. This bust's history itself is short and shameful. Don't see any historical exhibitions that are a clean statue alone in an empty room, because statues devoid of context are not a history book. They do not teach history, but they are symbols of what we value. If we wanted to learn something about the past and preserve it, the State Museum has already done its job to do this well. You can already read and see and hear all about numerous Tennesseans who died fighting against slavery, who died at the hands of generals like Forrest, as well as Tennesseans who fought to preserve it. This bust is disconnected from that history. This bust is not about the past. It is a message to the present. It is a dog whistle that racial supremacism, however subtle, is still alive somewhere in the dusty corners of our state, whether that message was intended by the bust's installation or not. It glorifies the past of racism and division. This bust is about seeing the rising tide of history shift against you, and being so afraid of it that you dig through your heritage, looking for a time when you came out on top. It happened in the wake of the Civil Rights era, and it's happening again now. You all have seen the flag of the Confederacy waved in the news by right-wing insurgents who stormed the national Capitol. You have to ask yourself, do these people wielding and defending Confederate history have the tragedy of a lost war in mind, or a legacy of white supremacy and a fear of becoming a minority? Flags, busts, statues, monuments, these are all symbols celebrating a failed rebellion, one that hoped to tear apart a young country and form a separate one which revolved around owning human beings and exploiting their lives for profit. How do you think white supremacist Tennesseans will react if they see this bust kept in a place of reverence along those who truly fought for human rights? How do you think they will react if you see these people enshrined in a way that we also enshrine our Union victors? What kind of message does that send about what we value in this state and how we view our own past? I ask this commission to consider its responsibility as guardians of our state history, to put this bust in context and recognize when her symbols are being used as a blunt weapon, to recognize that this bust has no place in our state capitol. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Shanae Williams. After that, we have Dr. Williams Jr. Shanae, the floor is yours. Shanae, you may be muted. Are you present? If you are calling in, you can press *6. At this time, we'll move on to Dr. Williams Jr. After that, we have Mina Shred.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay. I'd like to thank the commission for an opportunity to speak. I come before you this morning as a scholar of African American history. I'm an associate professor of African American and public history at Tennessee State University. I also come as a descendant of the people that were victimized by the Klan, both during Reconstruction and the era of Jim Crow. And I also come as a descendant of an African that was brought here in chains during the administration of John Adams, our second president. I encourage the commission to remove this bust from its distinguished place in the Capitol. When I look at Forrest, I see him as a man who victimized many of the people that I know and love today. As a slave trader on Adams Street in Memphis, he destroyed families. And when I look at that moment in his career, I don't focus so much on the money he made. I think about the woman that may have had to beg some master to purchase her children as well as themselves. I see a person that's being sold who has to deal with the breakup of their family. So I see death on a personal and a spiritual level occurring day after day after day in Memphis. When I look at Forrest's career, I see him as a war criminal. As we consider what happened at Fort Pillow, be mindful of the fact that the stated policy of the Confederacy was not to give any quarter to the men that, African-American men that fought. Then during Reconstruction, I see Forrest as the leader of a terrorist organization, a guy who gets his charge at the Maxwell House Hotel in this city. And I see the bloodshed that was perpetrated against many, many black and white Tennesseans, the descendants of whom, the ancestors of whom some of my students at TSU are, I see them as being directly connected to many of the people that was victimized by Forrest Bus. But more importantly, the presence of Forrest Bus is a reflection on who we are as Tennesseans, who we and what we value. So I encourage the commission to remove this bus immediately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Mina Shed. After that, we have Kendall Phillips. Mina, the floor is yours.
My name is Mina Shed. I'm a member of the local chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America and its Workers Against Racism working group. The art and statues that we display in our public buildings and political offices are statements. They convey the ideals that we have, history we respect, and they are depictions of who we are as a state and as a polity. The statement that this statue conveys is one of terror, one of genocide and slaughter. The bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest has no place in our capital. There's no nobility in anything that Forrest did. Forrest fought as a traitor. He kept Black people as cattle. He put his own life and the lives of others on the line to protect the right to treat another human as property. Curators of history or historians cannot lie to us and say that the accomplishments of Forrest are ones to be celebrated. They cannot lie to us and say that this is the type of man that should be honored and served as a representative of our state legislature. Or you're not lying to yourselves. You may genuinely believe that Forrest's story is one that is fraught with complications, but ultimately worth of respect. And if you genuinely believe that, you are tacitly, if not explicitly, supporting lost cause ideology, one that has rained terror on the Black citizens of Nashville since its inception and was fabricated with the express purpose to terrorize Black people. You are either cruel or you are naive, or I'd wager that you are a bit of both if you think that it belongs here. And every explanation that we have heard today about the supporting that the statues stay that people have provided, claiming that Forrest apologized for his involvement in the Confederacy and slavery, and I was not aware that a simple "I'm sorry" would absolve one of murder, rape, and terror, and claiming that Forrest was forgiven. But by whom? Did everyone forgive him? Do we as a people collectively forgive him for everything that he did? Claiming that Confederate soldiers and generals were absolved and honored as veterans, I was not aware that you were just now going to listen to what the government said instead of just cherry picking when it suits you. So much of today has been pure hagiography. By keeping the statue, you acknowledge that there is no getting better, that we have no interest in repairing what the Confederacy fought for. And perhaps you don't, which may explain why some of you have fought bitterly to keep the statue up. It might also explain why some of you have allowed members of the Sons of the Confederacy to occupy a seat on this commission. Obviously, you are not disgusted by the idea that someone would want to honor those that fought as traitors for perhaps the most disgusting right that one could possibly try to protect. These are people who are descendants of those who fought for the Confederacy. And I am of the mind that you don't get to choose your ancestors or have a say in what they did. But you do not need to defend them. You're outright cruel enough to defend what those people did. You don't deserve to be respected or listened to. The opinions of those who are members of the Sons and Daughters of the Confederacy or the members who vote to keep the statue shouldn't be suffered. They should be ridiculed and mocked for what they are. Bitter, wailing, sobbing children. And if we wanted to appease them, I would just jangle my keys in front of their face.
You're at time. Thank you so much. Next, we have Kendall Phillips. After that, we have Reverend Dr. Riggs. Kendall, the floor is yours. Kendall, you may be muted. If you're calling in, you can press *6. Kendall, are you present? At this time, we'll move on to Reverend Dr. Riggs. After that, we have Giovanni Matheson.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, well, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. I'll keep my comments brief. I think we've all heard, a lot of different things, not just today, but over the years, and I don't know if anything new can be added. And so I'll keep my comments brief, which as a pastor, that's relative. So just keep that in mind, what brief means. But I'm here just to throw my support in favor of moving the bust. I've been involved in this discussion for several years and have talked to different commissions, brought petitions to the room. And so everything that's been said is true. The one thing that sticks out in my mind today is the commissioner who said that he'd received 600 and some odd comments in favor and only 20 or so against. And I think if we're really going to represent the people in this move, the governor has said relocate it, and I think the majority of Tennesseans are saying to relocate it. And so I think the only thing left now is for the commission to do what they know people want them to do. And so I encourage them to vote to remove the bust today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Giovanni Matheson. After that, we have Professor Daniel Sharfstein.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to add my perspective on this issue. My name is a little tricky, Giovanni Matheson, and I'm a 65-year-old white woman who has lived in Tennessee for 40 years. Now, I mostly grew up in Minnesota, although I did spend several years in Birmingham, Alabama, which is where I'm going to begin my story. I was in the 4th grade. My teacher, Miss Krim, presented a history lesson, which included her observation that the Ku Klux Klan was actually a fine Christian organization that was only trying to preserve the American family. Now, when I told my mother what I had learned in school that day, she was horrified. Having grown up in the North, she had not heard this version of history before. Now, I've carried that memory with me for 54 years because at the time I was so confused. I loved my teacher and I loved my mother. So who should I believe? Now, the next year, I was in 5th grade in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a city that's sadly been in the news quite a bit lately. I showed up the first day of school to find that my teacher, Mr. Johnson, was African American. My mother says I was so shocked that I blurted out in front of everyone, "Mom, he's black." Now, Mr. Johnson would become one of my most beloved teachers, but being white in segregated America meant he would be the only black person I would know in my childhood. Fast forward 15 years to when I moved to Tennessee, where I was surprised to see how present the Civil War still seemed. Some people jokingly called me a Yankee. Now, I wasn't offended, I was just amused. I thought, wow, these people are really holding on to their past. Now, over the years, I've learned that this deep Southern pride was part of the lost cause narrative. The bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest in our state capital is a continuation of the lost cause narrative. I was confused when I was a 9-year-old girl. I was amused when I was labeled a Yankee, but I am not confused or amused anymore. I hope that we can do better for my granddaughter's generation. Let's not confuse them about the truths of our nation's Civil War. Removing the bust is a small step, but an important one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Professor Daniel Sharfstein, and after that, we have Lynn Egan.
Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
I want to thank the Commission for holding this hearing. My name is Daniel Sharfstein. I'm the Dick and Martha Lansden Chair in Law and Professor of History at Vanderbilt University. I teach legal history with a focus on slavery, emancipation, and segregation. And I'm the author of 2 books that deal extensively with Reconstruction and its aftermath. I strongly favor removing the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust from the Capitol. Its presence there is our shame. As we've heard numerous times today, Forrest committed atrocities as a slave trader, as a war criminal, and as a Ku Klux Klan terrorist. The defense of his reputation requires hair-splitting and rhetorical gymnastics and relies entirely unconvincingly on Forrest's self-serving statements. At root, all of those justifying and self-justifying narratives seek to make Forrest seem respectable while still allowing him to stand as a symbol of white supremacy. To my mind, Forrest is less a symbol of Tennessee history than a figure who's been elevated as an avatar of the lost cause, a truly damaging set of myths that apologized for slavery and rebellion, misinformed generations of school children, and justified Jim Crow and resistance to civil rights. The statue is less a monument to Forrest's place in Tennessee history than it is to the way history has been weaponized in our state. For my classes on the history of African Americans in Nashville, I've taken multiple student groups to Fort Negley. We talk about how African American laborers, enslaved and free, were building the fort when Nathan Bedford Forrest attacked Nashville in November 1862. As Forrest's cavalry drew near, the laborers did not run. They asked the U.S. Army for guns, and when the Army denied them, they took a stand, as historian Bobby Lovett has written, with axes, shovels, the tools they had at hand. To Fort Negley's builders, Forrest did not represent the glorious history of Tennessee. Instead, he and his forces promised death, bondage, and destruction. The fort's builders were ready to fight and die, but Forrest fled Nashville when he got within range of Fort Negley's cannons. He never reached the Capitol then, and he should not be there now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have Lynn Egan. After that, we have Jama Mohammed. Lynn, the floor is yours.
Good morning. This is Lynn Egan. I am a retired corporate attorney, and we're here today concerning a dispute over government sponsorship of images of the Confederacy. The speech by Confederate Vice President Alexander Stephens makes the purpose of the Confederacy very clear. He said that the great truth of racial inequality was its cornerstone, and that slavery was the just result of Black inferiority. So now this commission is to decide if Tennessee should keep Forrest in a place of high honor or put him in the context of a museum. It is a time when state images are viewed the same as a corporate brand. Governments actively promote their images to attract population and employees to their states, and cities decline and property values plummet if they are unable to do so. The Williamson County Task Force has provided evidence that promoting the Confederacy is not a good look. It makes us look backward at best. At worst, it makes us look like people who do not know right from wrong. And why is this? It's because the images of the Confederacy that are honored through the bust and through the flag, the ones that stick in our mind, are horrific. Everybody remembers that photo of that Black slave whose back is crisscrossed with scars from the whip. Everyone remembers the open casket of Emmett Till with his mother beside him. demonstrators in Birmingham being attacked by dogs and firehouses, and a policeman kneeling on the neck of George Floyd while onlookers begged him to stop. And we contrast those images when we think about moments where we seem to be moving against inequality that the Confederacy sought to preserve. For example, 1947, when Jackie Robinson broke the color line. In 1960, when Diane Nash asked Mayor Ben West if he thought it was wrong to discriminate against race. The Hidden Figures film, where we learned that John Glenn trusted the calculations of Mary Jackson over those of the IBM computers. The commission now is in a position to create a good moment like this. Are you going to continue to honor a brutal past, or will you give us a moment of hope? We want to see a news clip of the statue being removed from the Capitol and a newly designed seal. Anne Frank believed that in spite of everything, people are good at heart. I ask the commission to show us this, to give Tennessee a moment like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Jama Mohammed, after that, we have Benjamin Sawyer. Jama, the floor is yours.
Why would we honor a man that stood in the face of human progress 100 years after his death with a statue in the halls of the state capitol? This bust was erected after Black students fought for desegregation at lunch counters, after Congress passed the Voting Rights Act, after the Brown versus Board of Education. This bust wasn't put up years after the Civil War. This bust is not an example of historical art. It was put up while Staying Alive by the Bee Gees was on the radio. It was put in the year Star Wars was nominated for Best Picture. Some of y'all on this call have been bald since this bust was put in the Capitol. It's important to note these pop culture references and male pattern baldness to frame the time in which people thought having the first Grand Wizard of the KKK within our state's capital was a good idea. Nathan Bedford Forrest's statue doesn't belong in the building where our state's policies are being developed. I don't want to go into a deep dive about the South and its shortcomings, but the Irish weren't exactly dying to move to Nashville. They look elsewhere for a better life. The bust stands violently proud of its ignorance to impede human progress. As industrialization shaped the country we know today, these simpletons couldn't see the world for what it could be. The Confederacy's commitment to upholding a brutal and primitive system ultimately was their demise, just like holding on to that tradition will continue to hold us back. Where would this nation and the state be if there was a commitment to freedom and abolition the way there has been to white supremacy? How many Lewis Latimers, the inventor of the carbon filament used in light bulbs, were born into slavery? How many men like Frederick McKinley Jones, the inventor of the refrigerated truck that was used to transport blood during World War II, were lynched by the members of the KKK? I want to ask people, if this man is so venerable, go be like him. You can't. You won't even verbally support what he stood for in public because you know it will end your career. So you hide behind this rock and what it represents. It represents what you can't say out loud. Bill Lee asked us not to whitewash history in his address. This wouldn't whitewash history by just keeping this bust in our capital. It would dip it in bronze and aggrandize it. And I just want everybody to look at this. If these dudes show up to pay homage to your statue, come on, guys. This is real. We let the KKK walk in our capital and take a selfie with this dude? Just for that alone. And that's it. That's all I got for you.
Thank you. Next, we have Benjamin Sawyer. After that, we have Todd Lake. Benjamin, the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Dr. Benjamin Sawyer. I'm a historian, and I am representing myself. What it means to be a Tennessean is part of the story that we tell. It's what makes us who we are. And who we include in that story tells us a lot about who was here before, but it also tells us a lot about who we are in the present. Forrest, like all people who came before us, is a part of that story. And when you say the Forrest military record makes him a hero, but that his record as a slave trader, Confederate general, and KKK member matters not at all, you ignore the suffering of Black Tennesseans in the past and present. Not to mention white Tennesseans who were killed as a part of his life. So the question is this: is it reasonable that some people look at this Forrest bus and feel unwelcome in our state's capital? It is. If we want a story that unites us, we need a story that acknowledges all people's experiences and doesn't tell people that their suffering doesn't matter when it is reasonable. The argument against moving these busts, it rests on two claims, really: heritage and history. That's what I've heard. It's my heritage, we're denying history. But neither of those things belong to exclusively one group. They belong to all of us. And when you assert that your heritage matters more than the heritage of those whose lives were ruined and continue to live on with us by the people who are represented in these statues, particularly Forrest, when you say that, you're staking a claim. You're saying that some voices don't matter. As for history, I'm 42. I'll be teaching it for at least another few decades, and I promise you that I will continue to mention Forrest in my classes, so don't worry about that. Taught history at the university level for more than a decade now, and what I try to instill in my students is that this country is an inheritance. We didn't make it, we just became stewards. We have to ask ourselves that we're going to leave it better for our children than we got it. That should be our goal. We're at our best when all people are part of the story that we tell, and that we pass on a story that is more inclusive and involves more people than the one that we got. Moving these busts to the Historical Museum will allow for that story to be told. It'll be one that we can all share in. It'll be one that says that all perspectives on this matter. And if we can come to a conclusion where we can hear these voices, I think that we're going to be better off. So I would like to ask the Tennessee Historical Commission to support moving these to the museum, where they can be part of a debate and actually be part of a story that belongs to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Todd Lake and then Senator Brenda Gilmore. Todd, the floor is yours.
I've been very impressed with everyone we've heard from, and I certainly appeal to the Tennessee Historical Commission to vote unanimously to have the bust moved. We've heard a few defenders, and many more have written in. They talk about our history, but they're dishonest. They're talking about our white history. Just as when President Trump spoke, he spoke about our beautiful monuments, referring to the monuments to Confederate generals and soldiers. He meant our white monuments. That's the sad thing about this, that white supremacy is again on display. The Nathan Bedford Forrest bust is in the state capitol in an honored place, fully legally. Everything that's been done to harm African Americans, with a few exceptions, has been legal. Their enslavement was perfectly legal. The laws of the colonies saw to that. Their inability to marry as African American women and men was perfectly legal. It was perfectly legal to break up a family and sell the crying, weeping children away from their mothers and fathers. Nothing illegal about it. The rape of enslaved women and girls was legal. The disenfranchisement of African Americans after the Civil War was all done with the legalities in place, just like the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue is fully legally where it belongs, as a symbol of the supremacy of whites and their hard-heartedness toward the African American community. Jim Crow is perfectly legal in this state. The people who said that African Americans use this restroom and whites that were well within their legal rights. And finally, the Forrest statue is legal, and the Tennessee Historical Commission has a chance to unanimously say, we will not engage in white supremacy any longer in this state. We are not erasing history by removing the statue. You are honoring the truths of history by making sure that we don't honor someone who is dishonorable. And that has been laid out in great detail by the previous speakers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Senator Brenda Gilmore, and then H. Edward Phillips, representing Forrest family descendants. Senator Gilmore, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Brenda Gilmore, State Senator, District 19. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Tennessee Historical Commission for giving me an opportunity to speak to you. And secondly, I'd like to publicly thank Governor Lee for taking a just and compassionate stand and asking the commission to remove the bus and place it in the museum. I plead with you today, commissioners, to make today a moment in Tennessee history where we stood together for racial reconciliation. Let this be the last hurdle and an important step in a long line of actions when we take in Tennessee to heal the divisions that have long separated Black and white people in this state and across this country. I'm asking you on behalf of all of the Black citizens and families in Tennessee to please vote in favor of removing the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest from our state capitol building. When we install memorials in public spaces maintained by taxpayers, both Black and white, they should reflect our values. We've considered all that has been said today about this Forrest general being of the Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard, and Nathan Bedford Forrest does not represent the values of Tennessee. He made his personal fortunes on slaves, and above all, the legacy of Nathan Bedford Forrest represents an allegiance to white supremacy in every form. You know his history, so I won't recall the story of how he was the founder of Ku Klux Klan and reigned terror of Black people during Reconstruction. Tears come to my eyes every time I get off the elevator and look at that Forrest bus, and I can hear the wails and cries of those 200 surrendered soldiers that were still slaughtered by his command. The role he played is flawed, and we've continued to learn from places. I'm not suggesting that we erase history. The goal is much better accomplished outside the people's capital, in a state museum. Slavery, oppression, and bigotry are a part of American history, but we do not and should not celebrate these ideas today, nor should we glorify them with distinction of honor in public places. Our state and our nation have an immense amount of work to do to achieve true racial equity and justice, and while public monuments only play a small role in this, removing the Forrest bus will correct one mistake. I'm asking you to please consider the waiver and vote in favor of removing the bus of Confederate General and Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard Nathan Bedford Forrest. Only then can the people of Tennessee take another step toward healing from the long history of racial hatred in this state.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have H. Edward Phillips, representing Forrest family descendants, and then we have 2 comments that I will read aloud. Edward, the floor is yours. Edward, you may be muted. If you're calling in, you can press *6 to unmute yourself.
I apologize. This is Edward Phillips. I'm so sorry. First, I'd like to thank the Commission for permitting me the opportunity to comment. Secondly, I do represent the great-great-grandsons of General Nathan Bedford Forrest and his wife, Mary Ann Montgomery Forrest, and I represent SCV Camp 215 from Memphis. Now, what I'd like to remind everybody is that this is not about emotion, this is not about feeling, this is actually about the law and what the law requires. You know, is there a historical reason to move this monument, this bust? Is there a great public reason to do this? I certainly understand the public comments, I understand the public outcry. However, I don't think there's a sufficient historical rationale to move this. I point to the testimony of Ms. Howell from the Tennessee State Museum, in which she said that they're thinking about putting this in the military branch along with the busts of Gleaves and Admiral Gleaves and also Admiral Farragut. Well, the problem is she's already told you there's not enough room. There are also issues over there with regards to humidity, etc. There's a problem. Then also run into the issue of what I believe is viewpoint discrimination by coming in with this notion of contextualization. It's basically the government telling you what to think. I fall back on the view of Thomas Jefferson, who said that knowledge is the common property of all mankind, and I truly believe that is, in fact, correct. And we as a people should educate ourselves and learn about the good, the bad, and the ugly of American history. Then I'd like to also, as a point of order, call that certain comments by Ms. Russell be struck from the record, as she clearly gave comments saying that the Sons of Confederate Veterans are neo-Confederate hate group, that they're ghouls, and I don't think those are appropriate comments and should be struck based on the parameters for our comments made earlier today. And finally, when we look at this issue and we look at this notion, everybody's saying, well, these men were traitors. Well, I hate to break the news to you. A man who will later become Supreme Court Justice, Salmon Chase, was a circuit court judge presiding over the case of Jefferson Davis's treason trial. And in that matter, he had said, look, there was no prohibition against secession within the Constitution. And also, I would remind everybody that President Andrew Johnson did, in fact, pardon every Confederate with regard to any notion of treason. So to keep saying these people are traitors is actually historically inaccurate. But I do and would strongly suggest and ask and urge the Commission to maintain the bust where it is, because there's no space at the museum currently. There's no space in the military branch right now, and there are issues with the military branch museum and things that have to be corrected, and it's going to take funding and time. And basically what will happen is these three statues of these three military leaders will be put aside. And also, to remind everybody, Forrest was in fact a local political leader. He held 3 terms.
Thank you, sir. You are at time.
Thank you. Yep.
So before I read the last 2 comments, I want to give the 2 commenters that weren't present an opportunity to comment if they are present now. That is Kendall Phillips and Rebecca Blevins. So at this time, there are 2 statements that were requested to be read aloud. As a moderator, I'll be reading those aloud. The first one comes from Lupe Galbraith. The Nathan Bedford Forrest Jr. bust statue should no longer be located in our state's capital. Forrest's statue removal is necessary because he was a KKK grand wizard. Tennessee's awful history needs changing, especially since the first KKK members came from Pulaski and MLK was murdered in Memphis. I can't speak for all Tennesseans, but the Tennesseans I know do not want to glorify any more of the awfulness the KKK represents. I propose the statue be melted and reshaped into a symbol of peace in America, such as an American flag, peace sign, or UT symbol. As a Knoxville resident, thank you for reading my comments publicly. And the last comment comes to us from Miss Elizabeth Coker. I support retaining the current location of these bronze busts at the Capitol due to the large number of tourists who visit at a regular basis. The stories of these 3 extremely accomplished Native Tennesseans should remain at the Capitol in a place of honor due to their extraordinary achievements and the role they play in telling the story of the history of our state. General Forrest and Admiral Farragut both were placed in a bipartisan effort to tell our state was once divided by a cruel and horrible war where brother against brother fought for their beliefs in the evolution of our great nation as it is today. Both Governor Winfield Dunn and Governor Ted McWhorter supported the recognition and with good reason. By placing these bronze memorials to these two sons of Tennessee, their individual stories may complete the understanding of these trying times. Today, we look at the individual achievements of many controversial past leaders, former Presidents Bill Clinton and Richard Nixon, former Governor Ray Blanton, and other portraits still hang in the Tennessee Capitol on the first floor, despite their high crimes and misdemeanors. We have roads named for people who are not Tennesseans, one of whom is known for his achievements despite his blatant infidelity to his wife and family, as well as his church as a pastor. History happened, and to tell it truthfully is often difficult. While I maintain that the internet and social agenda of the current mob rule has tried to invent slanderous and unproven associations of General Forrest, his family, and leading Southern historians have been adamant that he was no hate monger and did not participate in the evils of his times as falsely accused. There is now new evidence that he was constantly under surveillance by the Pinkerton Guards in Memphis after the war, and therefore could not have been more unfairly treated by current detractors. General Forrest is the hero to many in the South because of his care and concern for the widows and orphans of his men and those of his army after the devastation of a 4-year conflict upon our soil. He concerned himself with the rebuilding of the South, and for that, all of us today have benefited. He employed many of us on his railroad, both black and white, and had old war wounds that other medical conditions allowed him to live longer. There is no doubt, according to my own research, we would have continued his efforts to heal and rebuild the South. If you believe in the false claims of his negative notoriety, I challenge this commission to prove those claims, and there is much more evidence to show that Forrest was an honorable leader of his time and a person who made a significant difference in the lives of thousands of Tennesseans. I'm at time. So that now concludes our comments. Thank you for your time and participation. Judge Summers, the hearing is yours again.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering if everyone would like a break before we proceed with the closing statement from Ms. Allen. Would that be beneficial? It's been over 3 hours.
Yes, please, Your Honor.
Okay, how long would you like? 20 minutes, 30 minutes, in something of a short lunch break?
Your Honor, can you hear it? This is the chair speaking.
Yes.
We had thought we would schedule a 45-minute recess lunch, but at that time I would also like to ask the commission members to get the proposed findings of facts and conclusion of law material that they can evaluate at that point, if that's correct with you. That
I would actually prefer, because everything really needs to be done out in public. And I also usually suggest that the boards and commissions engage in some discussion before they begin crafting their order. So it's not to be completely beholden to that document when they're engaging in deliberation.
And Your Honor, we were going to have open deliberations, but since they were requested not to read those documents until after Ms. Allen presented her evidence, is it appropriate that you give them the charge and the rest of?
I'm guessing 10 to 15 minutes for the closing statement and the charge.
You want to go ahead?
Your Honor, this is Christy Allen. My closing should not take more than 3 to 5 minutes, if that's at all helpful in looking at timing.
Okay, and then again,
This is Keith Norman. I'm hopeful for in the interest of time that we could
expedite the matters and move them forward, I think we could come to conclusion without taking a lunch break also.
I agree.
Me too.
Okay, well, why don't we take 10 minutes? I'm sure everyone needs a comfort break. So we'll take 10 minutes and we'll come back and we'll just proceed onward. If you want to grab yourself a snack during those 10 minutes. And so we'll come back at 12:35.
Your Honor, could we make it 15 minutes because there's some of us in this room that don't have that. We can't walk to our kitchen. So can we make it a 15-minute break at this point?
Let's do that. We'll see you at 12:40.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to take a break and run. Are we muted?
Yeah. Should be muted at this point.
I really wanted to knock that out.
You're not
I really
muted.
wanted to do
Yes,
that.
you're not muted. Mr. Ely, you're not muted. Miss Egan, you're not muted. Thanks.